What up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Today we have a friend of mine, Austin. His Instagram moniker is Bad Boy Medicine. He's a judoka, so he was a U.S. Open champion, very good judo player. Plays a lot of no-gi judo now, and where he's coming out this weekend to my gym to teach mainly a foot trip class. Because for me, like I've watched some of his videos. He's got excellent foot trips, and foot trips are one of those things where as a school, I want to dive into those more, and I want to dive into those more because it's such a like low risk, high reward takedown, and you can begin to use it almost like a jab in boxing, where you're keeping a person off balance, and they're not allowed to just settle into a good position because you're constantly keeping them dancing. And for anyone that's been hit with a really good foot sweep, it's a beautiful move, but it's so strange because it's like you lose your footing. It's like you just fall down a flight of stairs and you hit the mat. It's like you just lose your footing and there you go. And they exert very little force to do it. So so he's going to be teaching that at my gym. We'll have some YouTube content as well. So if you guys are like pop over to YouTube, you can do that as well. And then you can find his Instagram at Bad Boy Medicine over on Instagram. He'll talk about where that name came from. And again, thank you guys for being here. Big thanks to our sponsor, Charlotte's Web, for helping make the podcast happen. If you guys are getting a little bit older and you get interested more into recovery and all that kind of stuff, if you're maximizing your sleep, you're maximizing your diet, you're doing all those things right, then that's where, okay, supplementation can help. And obviously there's things like protein, creatine, and different things that are really good. One of the supplements that I found some benefit from is CBD. So again, I take CBD at night with my sleep. So typically a hot shower, CBD, and then I wind down with a book and I'll make my way to bed. And I have noticed a difference from using it. I'll go off of it periodically just to kind of feel the difference. But again, I encourage people to try supplements out there for themselves. So if you've never tried it, or maybe you've tried it, but you haven't tried, let me kind of go back a little bit. It's not regulated by the FDA. So I can't say it does really anything, right? But at the same time, anecdotally, I can tell you I've experienced some benefit from it as being an older grappler who wants to recover. With it being FDA or not regulated by the FDA, someone could be selling you, like you could go to the gas station, pick up some CBD, right? It's like those gas station pills for other stuff. They can put all kinds of crazy stuff in there that they want to. They did a study some years ago, and like 70% of the CBD that they found in the market was mislabeled. It didn't have as much CBD as it said it did, or it had too much, or it had other compounds in there. Charlotte's Web is third-party tested. They're a highly reputable company. Eventually, when the supplement is FDA regulated, they've already got everything in place and they're ready for it. They're actually pushing for it because they would like it, because it would make the product a little bit more, what's the word? A little bit more, what's the word I'm searching for, Eugene?
I'm thinking.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Right? So you know what you're getting into. But anyway, if you've never tried CBD before, or if you tried a product, try theirs out. You can go to their website at charlottesweb.com. The promo code to save 30% is JiuJitsu30, CHEWJITSU 30 for 30% off. Also, thanks to our buddy Matt at Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. If you guys have never been on his website, go over there and just take a look. If you've watched some of my videos on YouTube, which I imagine you have, that's probably why you're listening to this podcast. Although I do know some of you guys are avid listeners of the podcast and you don't watch the video content, that's fine. If you go to my videos, though, you'll see me every now and then. Most of the time I wear a Jiu-Jitsu shirt, but every now and then I'll wear a shirt that is not a Jiu-Jitsu shirt. If it's not a Jiu-Jitsu shirt, more than likely 9 times out of 10, it's a Epic Roll shirt. And many people ask about like the Kimura shirt or the triangle choke shirt, those sorts of things. If you guys want to check out his apparel, his gis, his rash guards, his shorts, everything else, you can go to his website at epicrollbjj.com. Keep your eyes peeled. Also, we're working on a new line of Jiu-Jitsu gear for 2024. So we'll have that coming out sometime in the near future. But until then, you can get some of his stuff. I like having my no-gi gear made from him because it's high quality, and he also does a good job with customer service. Again, the website, you got that already. If you guys want to save 20% off on it, then use the promo code JiuJitsu20 for 20% off the order at epicrollbjj.com. And if you guys want to support the podcast directly and get access to our library of content we've created with each one of our guests, including Austin, having a specific little sliver of information for you to listen to that's not in the episode. Also getting some narrated rolls, some warm-up routines from Eugene showing you how to warm up before training, things like that. Then you get access to that at patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. And again, when you subscribe, it's for a very reasonable price. You get the library of content. You also get an ad-free version of this podcast. So if you don't like listening to me do the ad reads like I'm doing right now, then you could always do that instead. So check it out at patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. And also, guys, in this episode, I'm going to mention at some point a hilarious message that was sent to me from a internet weirdo troll, and it became one of my emails. If you do not get my daily email and you would like to, go to my website at jujitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up, you'll get a couple of free ebooks that I give away. One is on developing a game plan. The other one is to help you with developing some strategies to break through plateaus. You can get those, and then you get my daily email, and you can unsubscribe at any time. But most people enjoy the emails, so we'd be glad to have you on the Chew Crew. And guys, with that said, let's jump into the podcast.
Is it pretty proper? Like, what's the judo, as far as judo goes? Like, is it very? It's not laid back. It's pretty proper kind of.
Probably depends on the
depends
gym.
on where you train, right?
Depends.
Because some places are probably pretty formal, and I imagine that some of them are probably a little more laid back. More like, is it more like the competition oriented places? Are they a little bit more laid back?
I think actually, yeah, that's interesting that I would have, if I didn't have the experience training, I would have suspected the opposite. But I feel like the more kind of competition oriented schools are the ones that are more laid back. Like,
oh, really?
I think it's the same in jiu-jitsu most of the time. I mean, not always, but most of the time, the gyms that I've come into that were the most formal, where you've got to bow and you've got to step off the mat and wait till you whatever. It's it was the gyms that were the most uncompetition oriented, and a lot of times they were focused more on the self-defense or a lot of the traditional jiu-jitsu self-defense stuff, which I personally
the McDojas, a lot of they probably do it more that way, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the jiu-jitsu, this is something I always I mean, maybe some people don't like this, but I think a lot of the traditional self-defense stuff in jiu-jitsu just is garbage. Where some guy grabs you and you twist it and throw him. It doesn't. That's nobody does that.
Yeah.
No guy comes up to you and says, "Hey, buddy, let me grab you by the shirt." And then the things that you see. I mean, we have tons of footage, and what fights typically look like. They end up looking like a combat sports match, either an MMA fight or judo match, a grappling match where, for instance, I've seen a guy where in Japan or something, the guy grabbed him and the dude just friggin' launched him. It's
on the subway. Yeah, the Tayotoshi, beautiful.
Yeah. It was beautiful, right? But it was just a throw, right? And I think that's interesting. I remember talking to some judoka, and they were saying that they look at judo as a better form of self-defense because you're starting from more of a standing position and you're throwing. And the idea is that if I throw you on the ground, this is a pond for you guys, right? If I throw you on the ground and you land flat on your back, if it's on hard surface, you're knocked out.
Yeah, it's gonna hurt pretty bad. Yeah.
Have
you trained in Japan at all, or just here?
I think it is very just traditional though and hierarchical there.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it yet, you should look up Japan Parliament fight. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Oh, the two guys.
Yeah,
that's great.
The funniest part is everyone has beautiful technique. That's the funniest part is you don't expect to see guys in suits pull out some beautiful Tomoe Naga.
Is it kind of like physical education, PE class would be in the States?
So,
well, in Japan, because remember Hiro?
Yeah,
Hiro, he took it because basically you had to choose. You either did he was telling me that when he was growing up, you either did judo or you did kendo. He's like a lot of the girls did kendo and the boys did judo.
Okay.
There's some girls that do judo too. But he would, he started doing judo because we were rolling one day and he had a beautiful drop senagi. I'm like,
huh.
And he was a white belt, so he hadn't been training that long with us. I'm like, where the hell did you get that? And he's in school in Japan. Like, oh, okay. Because basically said that the little guys would do senagi and the big guys would do uchimata. And that was the Japanese sort of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think there's a stat. I don't know if this is true, but I've at least read it somewhere. 1 out of every 2 people in Japan has done judo, which is crazy. Half the population has done it.
We'll get into
that was what Kano's goal was. When you read about Kano, when he created judo, the whole point was to create this sport that could make people better, right? So you readjusted all this martial art that's a fighting style, and then made it a little bit more digestible for the masses and a little bit more reasonable for younger children and stuff to do.
I imagine it's pretty hard teaching kids the more intricate judo move or jiu-jitsu moves, right?
Or even the more dangerous stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you take some of that stuff out of it, and you can work on the throws and things like that. That stuff can be thrown, but like you said, you take some of the, especially with traditional jiu-jitsu, would have dangerous stuff in there that was meant to maim people.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so you take that stuff out, and then you leave the core of the grappling in there, and you've got this really effective grappling style that then you could always just add that other stuff back in, and you can teach it to the masses.
Do you think we're maybe getting a little ahead, but do you think that maybe learning jiu-jitsu, I don't know how long you've been doing jiu-jitsu, by the way.
About a little over 2 years.
Fairly easy for you to, do you think, to learn, like, since with the background judo that you had, do you feel like it was kind of an easier
similar. It's so similar. So yeah, I kind of I use this analogy where jiu-jitsu, you know, it's maybe 90% on the ground, 10% stand up. Judo is like the inverse, where it's 90%, 10%, so 10% on the ground, but pretty much all the same thing. And so even just having that familiarity, if you guys were to start judo from the stand up experience you have in jiu-jitsu, I mean, that would go miles, you know.
Yeah. So what initially got you like started? How old were you when you started training judo?
I was 15. Yeah. So started, my parents just kind of put me in it and loved it, got addicted to it, you know. I mean, grappling's is so fun. I feel like it's so easy for, I mean, you guys get it obviously, but yeah, judo's the same way.
Why did they pick judo? Because it's, again, like, you know, I feel like most parents, when they think of martial arts, especially, you know, some years ago, I want you to learn karate, you know, like whatever, you know, karate a lot of times is what pops up when they think of martial arts. Why did you and your parents decide, let's try judo?
Well, I wanted to get, I had like done like a few months of wrestling, and I had hurt my knee. And I had really liked it for the short time I was doing it.
Was this in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like for, I don't know, a quarter of a season or something when I was a freshman, and I hurt my knee. And then I wanted to do something where I could continue to grapple, but wouldn't put the same stress shots does. And then I ended up just kind of starting with that. And I was like, oh, this is just the best. I can't do it.
What did you love about, what was it about maybe judo that kind of was interesting?
I think there are a few things. I mean, just as a kid, like 15, it's just so easy to find visually appealing. If you watch the highlights on YouTube, right?
That's beautiful.
Someone goes flying through the air, and it's very easy to sort of show that to your friends and be like, look at this. This is so cool.
Yeah.
And I enjoy jiu-jitsu more now, but I don't think when I was 15, I would have found the same enjoyment watching it. Just, you know, it's like judo looks more like
Jiu-Jitsu is not a good spectator. Jiu-Jitsu is not a good like spectator sport unless you were involved in it. Whereas, like, you know, judo has the same thing that, like, say, boxing and striking does, where there is a clear, you just got thrown, you just got knocked out, right? So there's a lot of intricacies that'll go over the heads of most people, but you can show someone like getting tossed onto their back, and just from with no education at all, you can look at it and go, damn, he just got thrown. Whereas jiu-jitsu, a lot of times it's, you're watching it and you're like, I don't know what's going on. And then some guy taps, like, what did he just tap to?
Right.
It just doesn't have that same appeal. Even like freestyle wrestling has a little bit more of a, you know, clear, like, you can tell when the other person is just done, and there's a lot of fast shooting. You don't really get a lot of time on the ground. You get some to try to get the pin, but a lot of it's just like this back and forth picking up and slamming and everything else.
Do you think, I mean, you've only had 2 years of jiu-jitsu, but do you feel like, which one do you think is more sustainable as you get older? Is there one?
Easy jiu-jitsu.
Really?
Oh yeah. And I find that, I mean, if I do more stand-up, particularly for whatever reason, gi, I feel like is more stressful. So you always hear the opposite
for the older people. They always say, like, the old guys say they love the gi.
Yeah.
But then for me, I'm with you, because I think it's where you're going. Like, I feel if I train gi every week, but if I train too much gi, like, I don't know if it's like my shoulders hurt a little bit more. Things are getting wrapped up around me.
You're bleeding everywhere. Like
fingers. It's weird, you know, whereas I can, no gi wears me out more, but I can do it more consistently.
Yeah. That's how I feel too. So I think jiu-jitsu is sustainable. Judo is less sustainable.
Yeah.
How did you get into jiu-jitsu? Because I don't know how it is. Like, I don't know a ton of judoka. I know some. There's actually a really, he was like a world-class dude that from Germany that competed in back in the day. That he lives down in Brandenburg, has like a little horse farm there. But I know a few, and most of them, they don't get into jiu-jitsu, right? They have their thing, and online it's hilarious where I'll get online sometimes and I'll look in like a post or something. You know, we were talking about like trolls earlier, and it'll be something like, you know, if they made jiu-jitsu soft and wimpy or something, or if they made judo soft and wimpy, they'd call it Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you know, that kind of thing. So there's that, like, that rub. So what made you get into doing, you know, jiu-jitsu and, you know, Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I think with a lot of people with judo is you get kind of put into this world, and it's very immersive, and you don't really I don't know. It's rare that you'll find somebody who does judo and jujitsu. This is more kind of the culture is just you stay in it and then you compete as long as you can until you're done, hurt or whatever. And then when that ends up happening, people don't usually continue to grapple if you've done it at like a high level. I kind of had to stop a little bit early, like before I like went and continued school and everything. And so I almost was taken out of grappling and then had 6 years to kind of think about it. And then got a text from one of my buddies who had wrestled, and he just invited me to a jiu-jitsu class. I hadn't grappled in a long time. And so we just went, had a blast, and it was nice. I liked jiu-jitsu more at first because I felt like it was so new. And like, in judo, I had been doing it so long and so seriously that any little new thing I could learn, maybe it would get me like 1% better, and it's these intricate kind of gripping things. But in judo, like I had no idea, or in jiu-jitsu, I had no idea what an ankle lock was or what a heel hook was
new.
or what. Yeah, it's just so completely different, but the kind of core mechanics are so similar. So it's familiar enough where I can improve quickly, and the same sort of things appeal to me, but I can also feel like I'm improving really, really fast, and almost feels like a new sport at the same time. So it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, there's so many things like from wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu that all like cross over, and you see them used. Like, I like sometimes like when I'm like passing with like say a certain cut through pass, it's like you use maybe like almost like a similar grip to like when you're doing Morote, like Seonagi, where you'll curl that like the gi up in a particular way. I remember back in the day watching one of the Schultz brothers, like he would do a counter to a single leg using a hammer lock, like basically a kimura.
I've seen that exact highlight, and it looked brutal.
Oh, well, they banned him from doing it. They're like, you can't do that because he was ripping people's shoulders. But you see, it's like, okay, like if we're allowed to grapple, really what's going to happen is the rules are going to dictate what we end up using. You know what I mean? Like if you like left humans together to like in absence or like without any connection to one another, if they were just like, here's your rule set, here's your rule set, here's your rule set, and they had a group of humans, if they had, 1,000 years to live or figure it out, they would all like come to what's coming already. It's like, because it's like the rules are going to dictate. The body moves in so many different ways, and the rules are going to say, okay, well, this is what we can do and can't do.
Yeah.
But you see that
get away with to.
What's that?
You're going to do everything possible that you can get away with to get you to that.
Exactly. You're going to play within this little rule set you have, this little confine that you have, and you're going to tweak everything to maximize your effectiveness in that particular setting. Because like in judo, you might be trying to go for a takedown or whatever, and then you're not feeling it, so you just slump down to turtle and you sit, and then a couple seconds later, nothing's happening, they stand you back up. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, you go to turtle, the dude's going to jump on your back, and then they have endless time to work.
Yeah.
So the rules just dictate. And then in wrestling, it's the same way. Like in wrestling, you go again to a turtle, you don't want to be on your back, but in jiu-jitsu, like we will go to our back. Yeah, it's completely okay, right? And even some of the pins, like crab rides and different things like that you would use in wrestling, you can use them. In jiu-jitsu, you slightly change things up.
Oh yeah, and what you said. Exactly. Like the turtle thing really resonates. My first practice, I remember that being a thing where I was doing no-gi, but the defending chokes and everything, it's similar. And I was balled up, and then all of a sudden there was no mate to stand it back up.
Come back up.
10 seconds. I'm like, oh yikes, what's next? And I just felt like I was drowning. One of my coaches, Roderick, he just had me, and I felt like I was like in quicksand, and just felt like prey or something, and he was just encroaching, and there's nothing I could do, and very kind of, it was demoralizing in a way that made me want to get really good at it.
Yeah. And you judo guys have this like great base with turtle.
Yeah.
Like, they get there and they're like, it's like they don't move much, but again, it goes to the thing where a jiu-jitsu guy, if I have you there for, the next 5 minutes, eventually I'm going to get something,
And judo guys are good at attacking turtles too. So, and that's been so fun
because they have to be so much faster with it.
Yeah. And like to try to game the jiu-jitsu system and like steal things that I could do in judo that I'm more familiar with. So with turtles, there are so many turtles. So we have so much experience attacking turtles that's where we're usually the strongest. Yeah. So one of the things that's been the most enjoyable to me in jiu-jitsu is figuring out how to leverage those things.
Okay.
So I always try to force turtle. So I don't really take the back very often. I'd rather be in a front headlock, I have a front headlock, or B, kind of navigating around a turtle. And it's just where all my hours are, you know. And jiu-jitsu guys, it's having somebody in guard, or having somebody on your back and doing this more methodical approach like that would, people have so much experience with that.
Right.
The
So then
quick
if you can come at them in a
thugs.
different way
Yeah.
that they're not used to, because then they won't have the muscle memory developed to deal with it.
If I'm used to it and they're not, that's the sort of, I'm always trying to hack that, you know?
Well, I mean, that's the game, right? Is basically you're always trying to leverage, like, how do I put myself into a position where I have something that you're not able to defend, or I basically have this position developed enough to where you can't defend it. And then, like you said, if you have some sort of attribute or some skill or technique that they don't really have a defense for, then it's going to be weird for them. And if you attack, say, like a turtle position, like a judoka, where it's much more explosive, much faster, it can definitely throw a lot of jiu-jitsu guys off, because they are used to that, like, slow sort of going for position, slowly taking space. There was like a match where I remember it was a big giant French dude, Freddie.
Teddy Reiner.
Teddy Reiner. It was in one of the tournaments that they were going. I forgot what it was, and he had like a beautiful knee bar from the turtle. He just like went in there and just, or maybe not a knee bar, maybe it was an arm bar. He went and just jumped into it.
Yeah.
Like the guy was there, and then he just like pulled this guy up and then just jumped into it. You're like, that's, and then like I can imagine if that guy was in jiu-jitsu, I mean, like, he's getting an arm bar.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be ready for a guy that size, that athletic, to just pull it out.
Exactly. So like my first day, I was getting caught with things that I had no experience defending. So the biggest thing was when somebody, you know, if you were to try like a butterfly sweep, or from standing, it's kind of like a sumi gaishi.
Yeah.
And for judo, we want to keep our base and do everything we can to not get elevated in the air, even if that means putting our legs and ankles at risk, because there are no ankle locks or knee locks. So a huge habit I had to get rid of, one of them, was when somebody did that, basing out in a way that didn't just give you my knee. It was such a hard thing to ingrain. Somebody tries to sweep, I just base out, yikes, here I heel hook, ankle lock, you know. But then certain things I could catch. And with judo too, because we have less submissions, there's less going on. So people get very good at defending certain submissions. So like the most popular one is like a triangle from the front. So you see it, someone's in a turtle, you grab their belt, grab their collar, pull them forward. It's called sankaku in judo. It's like a yoko sankaku, or what do you guys call it in jiu-jitsu? It's like just side triangle or something.
Probably side triangle.
Yeah. But everybody is so good at defending that in judo, and so you end up. But
in jiu-jitsu, it's not used as much.
So you have like almost these like very high quality training partners for jiu-jitsu in these very niche areas. So everyone is going to give you like a very elite front triangle defense. So if you tried in jiu-jitsu like that, so I was catching like black belts with that, but then getting ankle locked by like blue belts, you know. So it was a weird sort of.
Yeah, because it's you're an expert grappler in these different places, but then now you're in this other form of grappling that has all these other places that now you have these gaps exposed.
Yeah, like Greco, if you've never done shots, right, and then you'd only ever done tie-ups, and all of a sudden some guy shoots on you, you're like, what the hell? It's a low single, you know?
Yeah, you can wrestle up top, and if they lock up with him, you're going to launch him, but then you'd have this new area that you have to develop. It's just like even like a wrestler, like a good college wrestler coming into jiu-jitsu, they're not like a brand new white belt.
Yeah.
They're an expert grappler who has great takedowns, great scrambling ability, great balance, all these different things. They just don't have submissions, but they have a lot of other skills that they can easily, rapidly learn things really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was so what was like your highest achievement, would you say, in judo? What was like maybe your the best thing you feel like or the highest thing you accomplished?
So I guess the one I'm most proud of is winning US Open. That's like the biggest tournament that we have in the US. It's like a international one. And I won that, which is like just had a really good day. And yeah, that's the one I'm most proud of.
And so going from that, and then like kind of how long into training were you when you won?
Into for judo?
Yeah.
It had been, I don't know, let's say like 7 or 8 years or something. But I mean, just by years, I mean like 6 hours a day of only thinking about that, like moving around the country.
Yeah.
Like
you'd been highly competitive, and then so you had won that after training, 7-8 years. I mean, tons of hours. what was that transition for you? Like going from that to like, all right, I'm going to kind of stop grappling altogether. Like, how did that happen? And also like, what was like your mindset when you're going through that?
Oh man, it was, so I feel like there should be more effort in, especially these Olympic sports where you get funneled into these very, these very set paths that make it very hard to do other things. And so you see a lot of, I would see this all the time in judo, where you get some guy who is like, walks into the room and he's just that guy. Like he's like the superstar. Everyone's looking at him. Like, I want to talk to him. I want to go with him. And then his career ends, he gets hurt or whatever. And he's put all his eggs in that basket. And then he, let's say, I don't know, like he's just does a job, like, which is, there's nothing wrong with like a waiter or like, you know, like workers at a gas station, like fine, but it's a big shock of being treated almost like revered or something.
Yeah, that would be
almost,
really weird
right?
for your status as a person, because I've never thought about it that way.
It's an
But
identity
you're right.
thing.
Yeah, because you go from being the guy, right, one of the guys in the room, and then now you go to being, and as you said, there's nothing wrong with it, but now you're going to more of a lower status position in the hierarchy that we're experiencing in life, right? And so now you're going to that place. That would be a hard thing for your ego to wrap around, because you're like, who am I? I used to be this person. I feel like that's so true for so many high level athletes. If they don't have something to land towards, you know, they go through an ego death where they like basically lose themselves.
And then it's drugs and alcohol or death, you know, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so everyone knows Ronda, right? Ronda Rousey. So there's a time after she won her Olympic bronze medal. I think she was like waiting tables or doing something before she went into MMA. I remember her talking about it, and it was like how difficult that was. And I had sort of had the luxury of seeing this happen time and time again, and being scared of that happening to me. And so I always prioritized, okay, like let's say that something were to happen tomorrow, or I get injured, I can't do this, and judo is not part of my life. Like always was very careful about having something that I could kind of devote not only like my energy, but also like sense of identity to, like, because everyone likes to feel special, right? We all like to have something that makes us feel
purpose.
Yeah.
We want to have purpose,
and value.
Yeah. Purpose and value. We want to feel like we're worthy of something, that we're contributing things to around us, and find something that gives us some sort of sense of meaning, and fulfillment. Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. So, I remember when I stopped, I had started medical school. And so
medical school, is that why you stopped? Okay.
Yeah, that's why I stopped.
How old were you at this time when you were like, did you feel like maybe even your skill set start to decline at all in judo, or were you still doing really well? So that's got to be extra hard.
Too.
Yeah.
So I was at the top of my game, which was, so I had, you know, worked hard. The last nationals I competed at, for the first time I won it. So I was finally like first in the country. And part of me almost hoped I like wouldn't get in a way or right away to medical school, because I knew it was going to be premature. But the sort of coping with the lack of grappling, and I thought I had it all figured out, where like, oh, no problem, I'll just shift my identity toward like, now I'm like going to be a doctor, and like that's cool too. But there's something about grappling I think a lot of us find so deeply moving and fulfilling in this. It's like not only just the cool skill set, but it's this camaraderie, this forced meditation. I always think about that. I have a hard time meditating, but I always, when I'm rolling, it's this flow state, reset,
present,
kills that negative momentum that you have, you know what I mean? Makes it less powerful. And so I didn't have that. And it was, I just was like, all right, whatever, like I'll eventually develop this with medicine or science or whatever, but never really happened the way I wanted it to. And then I went back, and when I started grappling again, it was like, oh, I get it now. It just felt like I was like home for the first time again. And yeah.
Well, and it also has to be kind of hard, because you're going from top of the rung of your little ladder, right? Your space. And then now you're going to, you know, the bottom of the rung. Now you're going to medical school. Yeah. You know, it's interesting you brought that up, because I think about that, because you were saying that. And I remember, like, I used to wait tables back in the day when I was fighting, and everybody goes, yeah. So like, I remember being like a purple belt, I was fighting, you know, and all this stuff. And at the time I was waiting tables, and then, you know, maybe someone is rude to me or something. and I'm looking at the person, and I'm obviously being nice to this person because I don't want to be whatever. But in my mind, I'm like, when I walk out of here, I go into this room, like I'm somebody, but in here, you're being a rude asshole, and I could like break your face, but I have to be nice to you because otherwise I would get in trouble, But it's a weird thing because, like you said, you have this place, this place where you belong, where you feel that you're somebody. Then now you're going to become a medical doctor, but you're at the bottom of the rung and you're just getting started. That has to be. It would probably been an easier transition if you were like, man, I suck at judo. I'm just getting killed by everybody. Let's go do medical doctor. But you're like, I'm doing great. I'm winning.
Yeah,
now I'm over here.
That's got to be the tough thing, like being like. I don't know. I almost was like, what if, right? Like that what if thing. Like, how much more could you have accomplished? How old were you at the time, by the way?
No, that's the game I play with myself.
Yeah,
that's the sort of trade-off. Let's see, I was around 26 or something.
Yeah, so you're like getting into your physical prime, maybe.
And I started late, right, with judo a little bit. Like a lot of kids start when they're 3, and so I felt like that window was. I didn't feel like I had like started to plateau yet. I just and so I avoided the risk of saying, all right, let me just push it back a couple of years. Hopefully I can get in again. And, but the decision I made to start came with its own trade-off with, I left this thing prematurely,
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think it was a wrong answer. I don't think it was a right. It's just a answer or a decision.
Right.
Well, what's that? There's a quote I've heard used so many times, which is you don't make the right decision. You make the decision right. Right. So like, because you don't, you everybody's choosing stuff. Right. And a lot of times, when you make a decision, we all do this, right? Because we all kind of create these narratives in our mind about how things worked out, and it all sort of seems to work out. But when you look back at things, it's like you had these crazy things that all sort of seem to fall into place. But at the time, it doesn't seem that way,
And funny you should say that. I remember there's a guy, you may have seen him on Instagram, Justin Flores, J-Flow.
Yeah.
He actually gave me the shirt. Shout out to him. But
he's out there in California, right? Does he train with Keenan and those guys?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I've watched some of his videos. He looks super good.
Oh, he's so good. He's so good. I remember one day, I've mentioned this to him a while ago, but I was walking in the hospital, just kind of realizing that I was never gonna kind of feel the same way as when I had grappling. And I was watching his videos and just like looking at how cool it looked and just how much fun he looked like he was having. And then I just kind of had pulled the trigger and said like, well, I'm 30, or I was 30 when I made the decision. I still have a few more years to try to get back and make up for any lost time that I felt like had. So but just tried to make the decision right while it was still a decision I could make.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I remember talking to Neil Adams. He was a silver medalist, right?
Yeah.
And so he had a seminar down with that guy Ebb down in Brandenburg some years ago, and I went there because I wanted to learn from him and stuff like that. And he taught some great stuff on grip fighting and some different ways to do the Jiu-Jitsu, because that was his thing, right? Like the armbar. They call it Jiu-Jitsu, He has a British accent. He's like, so now we're going to look at Jiu-Jitsu, and he has a very proper British accent,
Uchimata.
Yeah, Uchimata. Yeah, it's like I would like that guy. It would be funny to just let him like listen to him say stuff because he has that British accent that like American guys think to sound like intelligent about everything.
It's great.
But anyway, so went there and was learning from him. I remember talking to him around the fire, and he said that his best years of grappling were after he retired in his early 30s, because he retired from competition. And then he was like, I was training, I was having fun, but there's no pressure. He's like, back when I was competing, it was just like you're training so hard and you're constantly just going. And like you said, it's not like a lot of the guys, in jiu-jitsu, it's not like we train. A lot of like, even world-class guys, like, when you compare it to like, say, the people that are at the Olympic level, it's still not the same in a lot of cases. Sometimes it is, but in a lot of cases it's different. And, he was like, it was so nice to just be able to train and have fun with it and be able to experiment because I wasn't training for anything.
Right.
I was just able to play. And he said he had his best years of training from like 30 to 40.
Right.
Yeah, well, I think for you though, like you started late. And so like you didn't have all that mileage on your body. You didn't beat the shit out of yourself. You started at 15 and you're only like 10, 11 years in, kind of, which is still, a lot, especially training 6 hours a day. but like some of these kids, I mean, you're still breaking your body down as you're doing it.
But they're finding out now. Like I've read several different books and things that they're saying that, they find evidence that like early specialization doesn't always mean anything. Like it's like sometimes it does, but they're like basically their whole thing is that it would actually be better off to have kids have like a wider base of stuff first, so that they have more things that they can draw upon. And they had all these different examples of it. There's a really good book called Range. It was by David Epstein, who wrote the Sports Gene. And in the Sports Gene, he made this idea like basically some people are designed for certain sports. Like, yes, you can become good at them even if not, but some people, like if the guy's got this giant Achilles heel that makes him able to jump over something, that's like a genetic mutation that makes him there. Or if you got a blood adaptation, that means like your red blood cells can transport more oxygen. I mean, you're going to be able to be a better long, or even if you look at like long distance running, you have to have very thin lower legs because of running economy, because you're just moving that part of your body. So if you've got thick calves, sorry, like you're not going to be a good long distance runner. Not like at the elite level. So he's like making all these cases. And then his second book, Range, he talks about the idea that, again, when you look at all these different people who were masters of all these different modalities and skills and everything else, they had this wide base of information first, and then they specialized later. And he basically, because he said, we all look at the opening of the book was Tiger Woods, right? He's like the classic, he was putting since he was a little kid, right? But then he compared it to Roger Federer. And he said Roger Federer was playing soccer, didn't really want to play with tennis, whatever. And he didn't specialize in tennis until like much later. And like later than what we would be like, most of the time we'd be like, he needs to be in there like hitting the balls or whatever. And so his whole thing was, for every Tiger Woods story, there's a Roger Federer story. There's so many of these stories of guys who did not specialize early, who, they had all these different experiences that they could draw upon that then lend themselves to the sport that they got into. And they were fine, and so sometimes getting the kids like, getting them specialized super early doesn't have that same kind of payoff that we expect it does.
And different sports probably have like payoffs in different ways. Like exactly the point you made. I know I've noticed that soccer players are always the hardest to foot sweep. There's these two guys that play with two brothers, and they're each played super high level soccer. One played professionally, and they're just like harder than like a judo black belt to foot sweep. I just can never get foot sweeps on them. And I've noticed that with soccer players in the past, and that's the cool thing about grappling too, is I'm always on the lookout for stuff. That's the only example I have is the soccer thing, but more probably exists.
No, I'm sure, but that makes sense though, because they're so light on their feet. And I had a guy that played soccer in college train with us, and he had a beautiful triangle. His legs were so like, he had so much dexterity in his legs that he would just like switch in these different triangle positions over and over again so quickly. And then I've seen guys from other sports come in, and every sport has developed their body in a certain way. And even if, it's not jiu-jitsu, they still have those neuromuscular connections where, they can absorb information much easier than like say the non-athlete. And then they start finding these reasons, for like you're doing right now with judo. But again, they find other things that I've talked to a swimmer before, and he was talking about like breathing through his techniques because he has to breathe all the time.
Yeah.
Right. When he's swimming. So when he was rolling, he was talking about like learning to breathe when he's rolling, because he's like, oh, it's like swimming where I've got to breathe as I'm moving through these motions, because he's used to breathing and moving at the same time, opposed to a lot of people, they tense up really hard at first, and so they gas out because they're not getting enough oxygen, because they're what do they call it, the Valsalva, where you're so they like tense up and they're trying to do something, and you almost have to like, hey man, breathe. So it's interesting how those things work. And so if anyone listening, it's an interesting book to read if you have time. It's a pretty quick read too.
And then the more obvious examples for jiu-jitsu are like the wrestlers, right?
Wrestlers and the
judo guy. Like judo guys, strong grips, and like kind of, I don't know. They always feel to me like it's kind of like stiffer on the ground, and jiu-jitsu guys. I remember when I did judo, it always felt like there is this, felt like an undertow of getting like kind of sucked into like higher up than I wanted to be, and them like around like this area, and I wanted them to be like far. It's I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
No, there's a style. Like I remember being a wrestler coming into jiu-jitsu, and I remember rolling with these really good bottom players, and it was like you were there, and then all of a sudden you're getting pulled into something. It's almost like quicksand, or like I remember just they felt so light. Like there was the presence that they had was so light. But then when you roll with a wrestler, it's like they scramble around and they don't stop moving. They're buzzing around. Their scrambles are crazy. And then judo guys feel, for me, the judo guys that I've rolled with, they feel a lot tighter, and they're like their base is really sturdy. So like if they get into a guard position, the wrestlers feel a little bit more like they're a little bit more all over the place, but they're like, it's so hard to sweep them because they scramble more. Whereas the judo guy feels like, I've been here before. This is not a new position. This is not a new position to me, but their like base is so sturdy and stiff that it's really hard to sweep them because they don't move.
Yeah.
And
we have a little bit of like submissions, like not as much as jiu-jitsu.
Exactly. You've been there before.
Any,
right? Yeah. There's no submissions in jiu-jitsu or in wrestling.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So you got into medicine. How is, and Eugene's a physical therapist.
Yeah.
And so, I know sometimes like I talk to him and his physical therapist brain is working. How has your medical experience and knowledge sort of affected the way that you train or your ideas about judo and jiu-jitsu or any of that stuff?
Man, I wish I had known this stuff when I was competing, because I would have.
What kind of stuff?
Especially like weight cutting. There's so many things, but one of them is I would fall into the trap when I was competing of, I probably did what a lot of guys did, where you kind of eat, a normal diet, and then you cut out like carbs, and it feels very uncomfortable. And then you probably don't compete as well as you could. And so when I was in medical school, I started like doing like keto or like intermittent fasting, and I felt just as miserable at first. And then after about a month or so, you kind of upregulate the cellular machinery necessary to like metabolize like ketones and fats instead of carbohydrates. And I would have maintained myself on that diet for longer periods prior to my weight cut. So I would already be used to, that sort of
used to the cut, metabolism.
Yeah. And so my body is already used to it. So it wouldn't feel as bad. I eventually started like figuring this out, but you see all sorts of crazy weight cutting strategy. One of them is like, one of the things that I still hear about is cutting like water out slowly. Like doesn't make any sense from like a physiologic perspective. You're just going to start increasing hormones that try to do everything.
You can cut it out like really quickly, abruptly.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, you can overload and then you cut it out like 24 hours or 12 hours before, but you don't cut it out slowly, because like you said, then your body's going to slowly adapt to that, and it's going to start hanging on to everything.
And you're still miserable, feeling bad.
Yeah.
And exactly the way you said it was perfect. So doing it like a lot, and then cutting it out, that's like the best way to do it. All sorts of things like that. So
many people would benefit from, like, if there was, I was talking to my like nutrition coach this morning, and it's like there's so many people would benefit if they had like if they had a coach who knows what they're doing, like with weight cutting and dieting and understanding how things actually affect the body. Like I've shared this story before where my coach Eli, I was getting ready for a competition. We had started the weight cut from, I wanted to be right at 200, and we had started the weight cut at 210. And this was like 8 weeks out. So like we have plenty of time where we can get there, be comfortable at the weight. And I don't really have to hardcore cut, because it's like an IBJJF tournament. You couldn't cut anyway. You have to like be where you need to be, because they weigh in and then you go compete.
Oh yeah.
So there's no like you weigh in the morning. It's like you weigh in. All right, you're on. You're out.
If you're wearing your gi too for
if you're doing gi, then you'd weigh in your gi before you go, which I like, because I think it's it takes out that weight cutting aspect of it. It's like you're gonna go in the weight that you should be in, opposed to like some dude who comes in and somehow watered out like 20 pounds, and the next day he's like, what's up, But but I remember like the morning or a morning before the tournament, I was like, hey man, my weights are just dropping a little bit. I was at like 196 or something, or 197. I was like, I'd like to be closer to 200. He's like, all right. So he's like, eat this many grams. I have my food scale. Eat this many grams of rice with your last meal, and then eat a Pop-Tart, whatever. And I was like, okay. And I asked him, I was like, why am I eating these specific things? He's like, well, because if we can get this many carbohydrates in, this like carbohydrates will bind with water at this rate. So if we get this, we should be around this weight come that day. And sure enough, it was like I was 199 the next day, and I was like ready to go.
Wow.
And so it's interesting, like when you see people, that it's not like a guesswork. Like back in the day when we were younger, we're just like cutting food, and we're like, all right, like let me kill myself a little bit, and hopefully my weight goes
on
down.
Like a bodybuildingforum.com or whatever.
Just whatever you can find, right? And then going to a guy who's like, no, this is how this works, and we're going to do this very precise. Like he told me he had a guy who, he had the guy just, to do it. He like had the guy, like when he cut out his water, he's getting ready to do a powerlifting meet. He had him take a shot of bourbon. I was like, why? He's like, it's a diuretic. Get him to piss out everything. And so the next day he's like, sure enough, there you go. Like I was like, and he was hydrated. He was really well hydrated because he'd been drinking a ton of water. So he's really well hydrated. So he didn't have any like headaches or anything from it, you know? So
coffee too does the same thing.
Sure.
Like it's all of those like little things that it would have been less guesswork, right?
Here's another question, because I remember we talked about this before the podcast. You were talking about like ideas about overtraining, right? So like using like knowing what you know now, like if you were curious as to whether or not you were overtraining, or if you were talking to someone, what's some of the things that you would employ as like a medical professional to figure that out? Obviously, maybe not everybody can do this, but what would you do for yourself?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things is like looking at the literature, like what are evidence-based, I guess, supplements and which ones have been shown to be safe and effective. And I could do a better job of this right now, but like just something simple like a lot of evidence support replenishing protein. There's evidence support creatine. There's evidence support like you know what I mean? They're simple things that I would have like I would try to optimize, and then optimizing all these little. It's easy to say like let's optimize sleep, right? But then, well, what does that actually mean? Like what are the ways to do that? And they're kind of practices that are very easy to do that can go a long way. So like with the internet now, these sort of things are more commonplace, right? So getting out in the sun in the middle of the day to sort of
sync up your circadian
rhythm, exactly.
Because it really comes down to your sleep routine. Because like that's something I like really had to dial in. Like we have obviously like getting sun. We have red light lamps throughout the house at night. So this way, like when it gets late, we turn off all the big bright fluorescent ones. We turn on the red lights throughout the house and get away from the screens and just read or basically just or listen to something, like as opposed to staring at that blue screen. Just
or at the very least have like flux or whatever on.
Something to help like fight those things that just keep us wide awake.
Turning down the temperature at night. So like if there's a common, if you take a bath and then you get tired after a bath, it's really because of the
drop in core temperature.
Yeah, exactly. So we get vasodilate, right? Get out of the bath. Blood is more towards our periphery, and so you dump a lot of heat. And that is also with the same thing as sun. That's a pattern that kind of dictates our clock, right? The sun, and what is coordinated with the sun is temperature decreases as the light decreases. So when your body experiences a drop in temperature, that helps assist. It might be bedtime. Taking melatonin, not right when you go to bed, but in the evening, like 2 hours before you go to bed. All these little things that are maybe 5% start stacking up. And then with training, just being smart about avoiding injury, right? That's like the biggest thing, I think. Is
what did you do? So you had like a pretty bad knee injury, is that correct?
I tore my ACL in judo.
How old were you?
25, I think.
So you're still kind of in the middle. You're tail end or
towards
the end. So what, you have to have surgery? Did you come back actually to train after it happened, or?
And the crazy thing,
because you won when you were 26, right?
So
you won like the US Open when you're 26.
I may have the ages,
but it was after the ACL.
Well, so my best result ever in judo was 6 months after ACL surgery, which is crazy, right?
And
that's crazy.
It's almost frustrating for me because I wasn't doing as much judo, but it was sort of eye-opening in that, wait a minute, like I wanted to like attribute it to a fluke, but I felt good and I was on and I was sharp. And for the few months afterwards, I still felt like that. And I had been doing all this, it has been very diligent with this, it's not necessarily like visualization, but like visualizing, like feeling.
It's kind of like shadow grappling.
Even like mental reps.
Yes.
I mean, there's literature now that suggests like if you do like when you're doing different things that like just cause you to retrieve information, that it strengthens the connection. So like everything from like writing in a journal and reflecting on what you just did can cause you to retrieve the information. So it helps you retain the information better. And they even did a study where they took these people and they had varying amounts of people, like they had to perform some type of like movement pattern. and they had some people do like all mental reps, some were some mental reps and then physical reps, and they had these different ratios. And they found that people that did like the mental reps before they did the physical, they actually had like market improvement when they actually did it because their body was primed.
Yeah.
So you, I listened to you talk about this, and it was very interesting. It's almost like, do you kind of zone out? Do you feel like you're maybe in like a state of like, I'm reading a book on flow right now. I keep talking to you about it all the time. And like, do you feel like you're kind of in a state of flow when you kind of get in there, almost like completely like focused on this thing, like on this visualization?
When I'm doing like the mental, like, I feel it feels the same to me as when I'm rolling, or not quite the same, but it's maybe, I don't know, 80% of that.
So talk us through that. Like, what is that process? Like, let's just give an example of a basic technique, and like, how are you visualizing? What are you doing? Like, what's happening in your mind? And then physically, what are you doing?
Yeah. So let's say like, okay, there's this like pen in front of me right now. Right. So I really try, and let's just interchange. This pen can serve for like any technique we're trying to learn. So pen here, I'm trying to appreciate what it feels like, and like what the sort of sensations are that like my body is telling me something's there. And I put it down, and like maybe like, like 5 minutes later, try to remember it. It kind of felt like this. And then I have a hypothesis what it feels like, test it, pick it back up. Oh, I was almost there, but it didn't quite feel like I thought. Now I'm a little closer. And so like with techniques, I've done that for years, where I've imagined it and then I go to practice, and for me at least, there are people that are probably like more talented at this style of learning. It takes me a very long time to accurately imagine these positions. So like I can't do it with most of them, but in Jiu-Jitsu, I can do it with like a darce, and in Judo, like hip to hip and like from space. Like if I'm making very little contact, like what I imagine is pretty accurate. But that's achieved by feeling it, really focusing at the time. And then when I'm leaving practice, almost like, don't say anything to me, I'm trying to remember, driving home by myself. Like I turn like my phone, don't listen to music or anything on my way back. I just try to focus on it. And then, later that night when I try to think about it, it's not quite as accurate as it probably was immediately, like a few seconds after. And then I go back again and try to make it more accurate, go back and forth. So that's the sort of way I go about sort of learning how to do it. And so whatever submissions that and like, okay, like how about whatever technique that you can do, like you can feel to the right versus to the left. Like we can imagine what it feels like to the right. Like I can't do darces to my left, so I can't even really figure out what it feels like, but I know what it feels like on the right because I'm used to where everything is. And
you don't have an accurate mental model developed for it yet. Yeah. I do the same thing. Like if I'm watching an instructional, if I'm looking at something and I like, all right, I want to try this. Like when I go to the gym, I'll pause it. Or if I've got to teach it, if I was like, I want to try to teach that or something, like whatever it is, I'll like close my eyes and then start to like zone in on like try to get a feeling for it. It's almost like you're imagining you're in the position, and you're trying to get a feeling for it to understand how it would work. Or even sometimes where I'm like trying to thinking up, like I'm chaining together drills, like all right, we're going to do this like little warm-up drill where we're going to chain together 3 different techniques as a warm-up. Then I'm like, as in my mind, I'm like, are these going to connect? And I'm basically going through them mentally to see if it would make sense, because if it doesn't make sense, I won't feel it. Like it's like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Like this isn't going to work. So it's like, I need to be able to feel it. And you're right. If you're not used to practicing something to a particular side or a particular technique, you won't be able to have that mental model to replicate that feeling. Whereas if it's something that's very comfortable to you, you can feel it. Like it's like you have this sensation when you're closing your eyes, you can feel it in your body where your arm would be placed. You would have the feedback from the person's arm as you're trying to walk their arm up or whatever. So,
and we're better at doing this at, I try to like preferentially select these techniques that I have a like kind of familiar anchor. So like when I figured out with the darce, I was like the first one I really tried to figure it out in jiu-jitsu with developing accurately. And then from there, like it's pretty easy to just like pick techniques that share a similar like scaffolding, right? So I went like next, I did like this like Japanese necktie. It's like a darce, but it's, you know, like not quite as close in, because I already had done the legwork. And so with judo, like I started to do this with these like close body to body techniques where I'm like, you're just like kind of in a clinch, like a wrestling air hug position. And if you can imagine what it's like to do, I don't know, like a body lock there, it maybe shares 50% of the, I don't know, your mental model with doing like a front uchi model. Like you're already in the hip to hip, you already have their weight, like kind of know where it is. So I think there's like a logical progression versus like, I guess the alternative example is, okay, I'm doing it with a darce. Now let me do it with a knee bar. You know what I mean? They don't really share a ton.
Right. Well, and that's like something that I tell, like, especially like a lot of people coming into jiu-jitsu, newbies and stuff, is that, you know, when you start to develop an area of proficiency in some part of your game, some position, some technique, whatever it is, then your job is to really like maximize that area that you've developed some competency with. You know, it's the reason why when you watch, say, like a judo highlight video, most people, if they're really good, they become synonymous with the technique. You know, they might have like, you know, 10 different variations of the same technique, but, you know, it'll be this person and here's their throw.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, they had other throws they used, but 80% of them, it was that. It's like in jiu-jitsu, you know, you say, okay, like people become synonymous with a position. It's like, oh, this is the guy with spider guard. This is the guy with a crazy killer guillotine choke.
The leg lock guy.
Exactly. He's the leg lock guy. He'll catch and I mean, so it's that sort of thing. And you think it's that same sort of strategy where you have this really strong mental model developed of this position, this area of focus, and then, well, why do I want to go over here and go to something completely unrelated when I can start to just go off to these other variations that basically use the same framework, but just slight variations, and boom, you're already using them. You don't have to create everything. Yeah.
Like if you know Spanish, it's probably going to be easier to learn Italian versus if you only spoke Mandarin, you're learning. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Just,
like the process of almost like the body mechanics or the movements are very similar. Do you think that was like the thing that improved your grappling, essentially your judo? Because you were off, I mean, 6 months, like if you had, you know, ACL, that's early to come back to at a high level, because usually it's about 9 months
I almost
to a
had
year.
no live, maybe 2 weeks of live going.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like, you know, you think your timing was, you had good timing, you had like all that stuff was kind of,
it was okay. I mean,
probably not okay. You won.
Yeah,
that's pretty incredible.
The timing came back pretty quickly. And I've been doing, you know, like drills by myself, but I didn't realize that was a thing. Like I thought for sure I was gonna go get smoked and like had my best result ever. That was my first sort of like piece of evidence for myself that there might be something here. But all of a sudden I went from not being able to like go live to getting to do it. And so I kind of let that fall like a little bit to the side. Like I wasn't doing it quite as intense. Like I was doing this when I was recovering, like just 4 hours a day of like very rigorous and like disciplined. But then when I started like medicine, I didn't grapple at all. I had been still like just almost habitually, I couldn't help it. I was just going through everything, like missing it, like seeing somebody walk and noticing where their feet is and just obsessed. Like I couldn't shake it.
Yeah.
And then when I got back, I felt, I don't know, like hadn't done it in like over 6 years, but almost felt pretty about the same as when I retired, which shouldn't have happened. So I've just tried to continue this practice. And I think both is the answer, right? Like if you can do both and then have the discipline to go home and not be, because, you know, like things get boring and that kind of fulfills a certain like, I don't know, like it takes discipline to do it if you already get it out of your system rolling. Like, oh, I got it. Like I got my roll in, like, well, I'm gonna go watch TV. But I was like, when I was injured, especially, I was like, I don't have that outlet. Like I'm obsessed. I can't stop thinking about it. And so
do you think that you know, because there's a lot of, you know, you injured your knee doing judo or were you grappling or so you injured your knee, and so there's a lot of fear, and people I've worked with before with ACLs and knee injuries and various other injuries, there's a fear avoidance behavior of coming back. Did you have a fear, or did this mental training help you overcome that fear of hopefully not getting injured again?
Yeah, I did. Well, I was still afraid, but it wasn't like the in the moment afraid. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I didn't really have much. Like I could still pull the trigger, and the techniques were still like where I thought they would be. I was still worried, like when I would go to practice, like I hope I don't get hurt today.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember my physical therapist at the time was like, don't feel bad if you just can't pull the trigger when you get back. Like that's just completely normal. I didn't feel like that, and I can't say for sure if it was because of that, but
Yeah.
I don't think it hurt.
I feel like in judo, you can't not pull the trigger. Like
Oh, yeah.
you got to go, right?
Yeah.
Or it's just the move's not going to work. I mean, you have to commit to it.
Yeah.
You have to complete commit. Yeah.
It's like a Jiu-Jitsu is like chess, judo is like checkers. So it's like more speed, like
Mhm.
less complicated, but because it's less complicated, there are less elements. And so how quickly you can execute those elements becomes even more important versus like in Jiu-Jitsu, it's so much more technical. There's so much
Yeah.
more you can do that you can know so much that becomes a little less important.
Do you think you could possibly, I know we're going to do a seminar. Is there a way you could maybe teach us or take us through that practice tomorrow as part of like,
I can
I would
try.
love
Yeah,
to like
absolutely, yeah.
go through that. I just think it's that's such an untapped thing for people because people feel like even like white belts, obviously they don't have the understanding of grappling like you would, but like you see
I think
people
it's
feel like they're
every
going to
life,
lose
though.
so much.
Like, and I think that's why you see people that when they enjoy something, they're better at it because they're just thinking about it more, right? Like if you have a guy that loves cars, chances are he's going to be better at working on cars than
Yeah.
the guy who doesn't like it or want to think of it, that just goes to do
Yeah.
does his 9 to 5, right? And so it's just, I think, more time thinking about it. And I mean, yeah, I mean, it is just you're learning something.
Yeah, I think you're getting in like a flow state. Like I'm reading this book and like everything you're saying is like people will do things, maybe even simple things for the sake of doing them, like the joy of just doing this thing, like visualization of these techniques. It's like I just enjoy doing this thing and like I can kind of zone out of everything else and get rid of all this other stimulus.
Absolutely.
Which is pretty cool. And I think that's, I think that's a huge part of it. That's hard for different people to get into this state, because they can get so distracted by so much. Like you said, I got to get all these external stimuli out and I have to like literally just be diving into this only thing. That's like the only thing that matters. Like, probably the house could be burning down. You're probably like over here doing judo move in the corner.
No, for real.
So yeah.
Or like another way to look at it is if we had to go, let's say, what were you guys' least favorite classes that you just took and then didn't want to think about it ever again?
In college, I hated I hated biology. Like I hated plant biology. Okay. That shit was the worst.
It's like, how much do you remember about that?
Oh,
nothing.
God.
But if you had a class that you really liked, like chances are you still remember it a little bit better because you think about it more.
Yeah. Well, and then also too, if you get into something, the thing about grappling a lot of times is because you're going through this constant feedback loop, things have significance, right? So like if you learn math, for instance, if they're just abstract numbers, it's very hard to remember anything because you're like, why? There's no reason for it.
Oh yeah.
But if if we say, for instance, like I'm sure there's math associated with delivering medicines to people. Like, okay, here's the math that we're going to do when we're going to dilute this medicine with whatever. That's going to have significance, so it's going to stick, right? And if we have something like when we're thinking about, okay, this guy did this to me, and you're reflecting on what just happened and getting that feeling for it. Here's what I could do next time.
We need the why.
Yeah. And so why are we doing this? We have significance for it. Do you think that when you came back from that injury and you weren't training as much, do you think that maybe you said something that you said that you thought you were going to get killed? Do you think that maybe took a little bit of pressure off you? Because you're like, well, shit, I just got ACL 6 months ago. I'm going to get killed. So let's go do this. Do you feel like there was maybe less pressure on you because you didn't have the normal training lead up?
Maybe. Yeah. It's hard to say.
Yeah. It's been a while. I was just curious.
No. If I think back, I think I often felt like I was going to get killed before going in.
Okay.
I was never one of those guys that like walked in feeling confident, and like the tournaments that I did, those are the ones I didn't do well at. Like I needed
the ones that you felt confident.
Yeah,
I'm the same way. I gotta feel like that maybe I might get killed.
Yeah,
so it keeps me sharp. Because if I get relaxed, if I think I'm going to kill it and I get relaxed, those were my worst performances.
I'm not nervous. I play like garbage. But if I'm those ones where I'm like my parents are there, like whatever, like those are where I'm like I want to win, and
you feel like you have something on the line.
Yeah, I feel on.
How do you handle the nerves? Is there something you do?
I try to embrace it. So I first tried to fight it, and I went through all these sort of things. Like I got to calm myself. And then my dad had mentioned this kind of as an aside one day. He was like, we have these these feelings that are like universally are universal, like have been selected for in every species, like even invertebrates, the things farthest away where we have these adrenaline, and it's for fighting, right, or running. And there's been a super potent just selection process to have that. And so he's like, you know what, why don't you try to like tap into it and try to look at it as just like a state that you need more practice in, but not necessarily, and maybe one that could be like a power.
Yeah.
And so I try to like get that, and it feels uncomfortable, and I can feel like my heart beating and like I'm shaking, but I try to look at it as like well, this is just me getting like Super Saiyan mode.
Yeah, you're going to wield it. Well, there's a thing, they call it anxiety reappraisal. So basically they talk to all these different performers, right? High level athletes, and you talk to all of them, and they always like say stuff like, I'm excited, I'm on edge, I'm ready to go. And then they, when you talk to the less performers, like, I'm super nervous. They're both feeling the same feeling. It's how they interpret it, right? So like, if you're like, if you're feeling all that anxiety, you're like, oh God, I'm super nervous. I wish I didn't feel nervous, whatever. But like you said, no, because you know that if you're nervous, you're going to perform better anyway, and it's going to make you strong. And it physiologically, it will make you stronger, make you faster, make you more alert because you got all this stuff pumping. So then you're like, okay, no, I'm going into super mode now.
Yeah.
Like, this is good. I'm ready to go. This is how I'm supposed to feel.
Yeah.
It's like when you get into that, then it's like, oh, we're good. You've unlocked a new level of your game because now you're no longer looking at it as a negative. You're like, no, this is great. I'm going to do great. I'm going to wield this power that I have.
And like the more practice I think you get in that state, the more you like figure out how to harness it. So you're like what you said, you're faster and you're stronger. You get tired more quickly, but you're the speed I at first noticed, and I noticed that in tournaments, my drop Seonagi, which is like a pretty speed-based throw, was always better than when it was in practice. And then 100%. These more flowy moves, like Tayatoshi, and the more kind of like relaxed, like flowy one, those weren't often there quite as much, and where they would be in practice. So I tried to like realize that, and then like adjust my game to like whatever these throws are that I seem to be gravitating to and having success within tournaments. I'm going to focus in on that. And that's, I guess, part of the, question of how do you get better at dealing with it, is like knowing like when, like what attributes are going to get a boost, and then tailoring that to your game
and getting your reps in with it and understanding how it affects you. Speaking of reps, when you were like getting ready for your tournaments, when you were at your best in judo, when you're really like focused on competition, did you drill your techniques? Like, did you get like repetitions of the movements in? Like, how did you how are those practices broken up? Because I've seen like lots of places do it differently, and I've seen in a lot of like judo gyms where they would do lots of like not 100% live like practices, repetitions, and drills, and then they have some days where they come in and that's all they're doing. And I've seen wrestling gyms do the same thing, like college wrestlers, where they'd have a drill day where they're doing all these different movements and drills and chain techniques and everything else, and then they have a day where it's like all like live wrestling and different variations and stuff like that. It was like, for you, what were you doing when you were basically like coming up and getting to your best in judo?
Man, I think looking back, I think it was just whenever I was thinking about it the most, that's when I was at my best. And when those practices where I would leave and kind of like check out, like I wasn't super enthusiastic about it. And so I kind of tried to figure out, well, how can I make myself enjoy this more? And like certain things are never going to be fun, and you just kind of have to get through them, like running or whatever, sprinting. Like I had to do that. But I would try to find little ways to like make them fun. You know what I mean? Like if I sprint really hard from like here to here, and I'm a second faster, then I'm going to like allow myself to like go like watch a movie I want to see. And then I would kind of start
make
to
little deals with yourself.
Yeah. And then with practice, like certain techniques I just found fun. Like they just feel more fun.
Now, did you drill them? Like, did you like, would you perform like repetitions of it, or did you just like kind of look at it a little bit? All right, let me go practice during a live round of randori.
So I didn't ever feel like those those drills where I was like getting as many throws as I could fast. I felt like it would get me in good shape, but I didn't feel like it improved my technique.
Okay.
In contrast, I thought it actually made it worse. I would notice getting better when I would like slow it down and I wasn't tired. It's like studying, like going back to studying. Like if I had a cup of coffee in the morning, I'm gonna be more effective than if I'm just like, I gotta read, like read a page. I have no idea what you just read. Like how many times does that happen?
Yeah, slowing down.
Yeah,
and really like focusing on the movement.
So I remember that was sometimes frustrating for my coaches, and I would have to pick techniques that I didn't even like when I was doing these fast drills because I didn't want to ruin them. So like I would pick, I don't know, like didn't do a lot of hurrah goshi. So I was like, all right, I'm on the pad, crash pad, like boom, boom, boom. Like I just don't want to make him mad. And then when I had time, I would actually go with the techniques that I really cared about and wanted to get better at my own pace when I wasn't tired, when I felt like I was at my best learning.
Well, that kind of goes back to the idea that when you're going through that moment, it's like you're talking about you're holding the pin and you're feeling the pin and really focused on that movement, right? When you're doing that technique and you're slowing things down a little bit, you're really tuning into how does this thing feel? So that this way you can kind of find that feeling when you go back to actually like when you're locked up with someone and you're trying to hit it, like, again, like a lot of times when we're rolling or we're, grappling with each other, you have a feeling from the technique. You do a movement and there's a feeling and you instantly know, oh, there it was.
Yeah.
Especially with a throw.
Yeah.
Like if you get like a good seonagi or something, you're like, oh, there it is. Like you feel their body weight feels a certain way and it hits your body a certain way. Like, there it was. Or if I shoot him for like if I go in for my arm drag to inside trip to Koichi, like I can feel it. I'm like, oh, there, like you could just feel their body like fall back.
I can't wait to learn that one.
And you're like, that was it. Like that was perfect. And you can just feel it. So, but when you're drilling it, I've done the same thing where you really try to tune into all the feelings and sensations, and then slowly speed it up, opposed to like just trying to be really fast. And
you can make it worse.
It can get sloppy.
Yeah.
Well, because you're now basically, especially if you get really sloppy with the technique, you're basically getting repetitions and basically programming your body to do sloppy work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like just the different learning styles too. Like some people need those just a ton of reps, and some people need fast reps, and some people need very slow, deliberate, kind of like very focused reps.
I'm very slow with that stuff.
Yeah. And it's just interesting. I think it's not right or wrong. It's just what like feels good, feels good to you. So about like you started like an Instagram channel or Instagram page. It was called Bad Boy Medicine. Tell me about that. Like, why did you feel the need to start that and kind of find this niche as like a no-gi judo guy, which I didn't even know that was
judo influencer,
which I really didn't know that was a thing. And by the way, we need to talk about, you guys were talking about having like haters and stuff. I'm curious to hear about some of those stories. Those are fun.
You gotta have some.
Yeah.
So like tell me about like just thinking like I want to start this thing and I want to name it Bad Boy Medicine and then show people some no-gi judo stuff.
So like the name was just like the dumbest thing I could think of, that like just like that's the joke. It's like the stupidest, like it's like ironic, right? It's like so dumb.
Yeah, because you're very much the antithesis of what I would imagine as a bad boy, right?
Yeah, that's the joke. Like like when I was joking with my friends, like I'm gonna call this, and they're like, "Oh my god, no, you won't." And it's like I thought it was catchy and like it's just so stupid.
No, it's a catchy title.
Well, what do people think? They like it? Like, do people say your name's stupid, or what do they say?
Oh man, I mean, at first, I kind of like recognized this going in. It was like such a dumb name that it's probably going to be a little bit more work at first to kind of get it moving. But once I can get a little bit of momentum, it'll be less, I don't know, ridiculous sounding. Like, oh, like if I chose the name, I don't know, like Universal, whatever, it'd be hard to remember like when you're driving home. But like Jiu-Jitsu is another good one. Like Jiu-Jitsu is just like so like you're not going to hear that and not remember it.
It's a good mouth noise.
Yeah, well, it sounds so close to Jiu-Jitsu, Chewjitsu, and then Chewy. Everybody knows Chewy, and then like you're kind of synonymous with that thing now. It's pretty interesting.
And then with the like the Instagram, I didn't really know, and I still don't really know like what exactly I wanted to turn into. But I learned like pretty much all of my judo like watching online, like YouTube, or like back before YouTube was even super. Like these little GIFs that you have for those. And I had always wanted to do that, and I thought that whatever I want to kind of do with it later, even if I don't know what it is, I could still be productive and work towards something that like I love and like love teaching. And I don't know, I didn't really have a plan, like a calculated
Yeah.
approach or anything.
Just
but
that's just where you're drawn to.
yeah, I just like love
Yeah.
teaching. And then with the no-gi judo, it was just so different. And I felt like it was such unexplored territory that I could actually like not only teach, but I'll maybe even like pioneer some stuff.
Yeah.
And I just love like that, like figuring out problems. And if you can try to figure out a problem that other people haven't solved, like that's even cooler. And like the easiest way to figure out a problem that somebody hasn't solved is picking something that somebody hasn't tried to solve.
Yeah.
And so there isn't a lot of people doing no-gi judo.
Yeah, there's not very many. There's not many, like, because I feel like
It's
there's
Justin Flores and
Justin Flores, you. I think I've seen Satoshi, like Ishii.
yeah.
He started to do some stuff, you know, but I feel probably like many, like there's probably some dogma associated with judo. Just like there's jiu-jitsu in certain circles and stuff like that, where it's probably maybe not it's kind of frowned upon, maybe a little bit. Like no,
What?
we frown upon, like we wear the gi.
Oh,
We wear the
Is that-
kimono. This
yeah.
is what we do. This is judo. Like no gi, no, it's not judo. I don't know if that's a thing.
I don't know, honestly. I didn't ever feel like that. I always thought the opposite, where I always felt super self-conscious about telling people I did judo because it's like oh, you like karate, like that's the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well,
Like, my 10-year-old son,
He's a
like,
black belt. Yeah. No, we get that same thing. It's
All
like,
the time. And
tell
the karate
someone,
chop motion.
I'm a jiu-jitsu. I'm in jiu-jitsu. Oh yeah, my son's a black belt. What are you? I'm a purple belt. How long have you been training? I've been training for 8 years. Why aren't you a black belt yet?
Yeah, my son got it when he was 6.5.
Yeah,
2 months of training. But like, what do you think distinguishes your kind of what you teach or how you teach? What makes it unique to?
I just don't think there are a lot of people doing it. I think when like people try to improve their stand-up and no-gi, it's adapting wrestling. And there's just so much wrestling in the US, and that is like where so much of the culture around like combat sports is shaped. And judo is just less popular, but every once in a while you get somebody like Justin or like me that like Justin wrestled, and I didn't like, I really like a few months or something, but like I don't say that I did it because it doesn't really feel like that, but my experiences in judo. And so if I wanted to take people down, that's like really all I kind of knew at first was using throws and figuring out how to work, all right, like how, like, can I get like a drop Sayo to work or no? Like, is it worth it? Is it not? Like, oh, Soto seems to be there. Shimada seems to be there. How can I can only do it from an underhook right now. I need another hand. How can I get to it more often? Well, here's a whizzer. Do I even need this hand? Because as soon as I get it, people tense up and know I'm going to go. Can I do it from one hand? So I'm addicted to those, like,
what if
figure out those problems.
Yeah.
Well, and there aren't a ton of people, like you said, in the US especially. There's not a ton of people doing like no-gi judo, and then especially not in context of grappling, jiu-jitsu grappling or submission grappling.
It's the jiu-jitsu, it's the no-gi jiu-jitsu that like gives me the opportunity to do that.
Well, and the thing is, me and Brandon, one of my students who's a wrestler, we were talking about this, like I don't know what the circles is. Like he was talking about in wrestling, it's not as big. Like, I don't know what it's like in judo, but in like jiu-jitsu, people are trained to be like a rabid for like information. Like, and they don't care where it comes from. Because like jiu-jitsu to me is kind of like almost like an anti-martial art. Like we're like a bunch of mercenaries looking for techniques.
Scavengers.
We don't care where it comes from. Sambo, give me. Judo, give me. Wrestling, I don't care. If I can submit a dude with it, we have very few rules when we grapple. So we can do all kinds of crazy stuff because there's not very many regulations to us. Whereas in wrestling and judo, there's a lot more constraints on what you can do. Like you can't grab this grip, or in wrestling in high school, you can't grab both your hands on their arm at the same time. It's illegal, right? So like we don't have those rules, so we can play a lot more. And so I think it's allowed us to, play a lot more freely to, basically, hey, judo guy, give me some shit, and then wrestler guy, give me something, sambo guy, give me a leg lock. And then we sort of create our own little spin on it, and our own little new stew in it.
Jiu-Jitsu's so good about that. And I've now, I always, in the back of my mind, like, well, will I go compete again and try to, I don't know, win some big tournament? And whenever I have those thoughts, it's always like trying to steal from jiu-jitsu and wrestling. Like I didn't know what a high dive was, and like Greco, and I didn't know what like a north-south choke was. But now, like when I'm, like imagining what if I have that same thief mindset.
Yeah.
Give me.
Well, that's a good martial artist, right? They were
Yeah.
all a bunch of thieves.
Yeah.
We just steal from everyone.
That's really, I mean, what's Jiu-Jitsu essentially? You know, it's from Judo. It's taking things from Judo and
And how does it happen? We learn from one person and we
Yeah.
steal from them. And there's a
I'm going to create this thing. I'm going to extrapolate this ground game that's not really being used so much, but that's where it comes from, is from Judo.
there's a book called like Great Artists Steal or something like that. Basically, it's a short book. But basically the guy's talking about, you know, if you look at anybody's art form, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's pictures, music, martial arts, business, whatever. They were taking from influences that came before them, and they're like looking, and then they take from multiple different people, and they here's my version. You know, if you look at like even like stand-up guys, you'll find or even like talk show hosts, like if you go watch, and this is old stuff, but like again, this is just me, like you could go watch like an old Bill Maher episode back in the day, and he basically, his monologue almost sounds like a Johnny Carson monologue, because Johnny Carson was the man who started like late night television shows like Jay Leno, David Letterman, all those guys came from that guy. So they're all influenced by him, you know. And so if you watch some of those old monologues when they were just getting started, you're like, you could just tell the influence.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's interesting because we're all doing it. We're all stealing from each other and making our own version of it.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting.
And like little techniques or adaptations that I have like came up with, like it's really just stealing little bits from different sports. Like my like favorite move right now is this like Kochi snap down, I call it, but it's just an arm drag from wrestling mixed with a bad Kochi from judo.
Yeah.
And like it's like 80% arm drag that my wrestling buddy taught me, and then I just added the foot. I was like, what would happen? And I had a lot more success with it. Didn't get redragged. I could like knock down more consistently, but it's not like I just stole it from two different sports and combined them.
And now you're like, and then you're basically connecting things that seemingly are disconnected, and then you make something new, right? And I mean that's really what everybody's doing anyway. Like, I mean, most of the stuff has already been done. It's been said, it's been done. You know, you can go back and find the philosophical idea that seems to be the brand new trend right now. And it was like, oh, they wrote about that, you know, 2000 years ago from different, both East and West. Right. But it's just, we're remixing.
Absolutely.
We're just remixing is all we're doing. Even you look at like Steve Jobs, when he made the iPhone, he had technology for this touch screen stuff that was just, they bought the patents. They weren't doing anything with it. And then they had and then eventually they had the iPod, and they created the iPod where they could touch it and stuff like that. And they were like, cell phone, iPod, boom, brand new. It's an iPhone. It was a brand new revolutionary thing. It was just taking two things that were different, and we just combine them together. We make something new.
Or like back in the day, like the most respected like pioneers and whatever, like Newton with physics and math, like he like said something to the effect of, he was able to do what he did like because he was standing on the shoulders of giants. Yeah. Like already like taking from the past, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we're all doing that.
Yeah, so, you adapt it and modify it for like the rule set or the style of grappling, or for your body, or for.
But still take credit for it, though. That's my.
I invented this. I came up with this all by myself. No one else did. What else were you had another question that you threw out there a minute ago. We went off on a tangent.
I don't know.
I can't remember, because it was like.
Oh, the trash talk or the
the trolls.
The haters?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, tell us about some of your trolls. I always like this. Me and my student Brandon, who has like a little bit of he has a pretty good following on Instagram and stuff. We get a kick out of it.
You just posted the one your email about the guy that sends you weird messages.
Yeah, if you guys if you don't follow me on my, if you're not on my email list, you should be. But I'm going to read these, and then you can tell me some of yours. So basically, I have this person that would randomly send me messages. The pictures of a woman, which I'm pretty darn sure it's not a woman. I'm pretty sure
pictures. The
person's profile picture. But basically, they send me I have a picture. I'll show you. This is the picture that this person commented on.
Okay.
And they started sending me messages, and basically it's where my gi was ripped up, and like you can see like my pec muscle and my nipple hanging out to the side, and then they started. So every 6 months or so, they'll send me a message. Here's one of them, says, "See, dress exactly like this, but with those sexy man boobies of yours poking out. Well, maybe you're much younger in that pic, so you probably don't have them anymore." The next one says, quote, I like skinny or muscular built guys with man boobs. I don't like seeing them shirtless. I like seeing them slip out.
The old nip slip.
Guy
No.
knows what he likes.
Yeah, of their jiu-jitsu uniform.
Is it a guy or a girl?
Yeah, undetermined.
It says the profile picture is of a woman, but we both know it's a guy. I look for pics like that. I had this one for years, and finally decided to look up jiu-jitsu, and yours showed up. Had this picture for years, and so basically just the old spank bank.
On the gold mine.
That's right. And then last one says, do you have pictures of yourself in your jiu-jitsu uniform with those sexy man nips slipping out? Maybe I'll just Photoshop a uniform on you. I'm like,
all right, good stuff. Good
So,
stuff. People are weird on the internet.
Oh, bro. Having the ability to post something anonymously,
I had
it's something.
And you had the same guy too. I had the guy. I'll just
Sniff
share.
the feet?
Yeah, no, he would like comment on my feet.
The guy, like the one where he superimposed his nose on my thing.
No. But he would just like comment on my YouTube on my feet.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, oh, like I don't know what he was saying. It was weird. Anyway, that was me. Not as probably as bad as your harassment over there. But what did you have anything fun?
Oh yeah, I get a lot of like people like kind of trying to start conflicts and then I just try to be nice back. And I get it because like I remember when I was first starting on like Instagram.
What do you mean starting conflicts? Like trying to like start like a beef where they can like
a match. So like there's one guy, shout out to him, Mikey. I like him and like we're cool now, but we started met by him like it's like see a video of mine. So like judo's like sucks so much. Like I blast W and like you would end up in a hospital. Blah, 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 and
so
then, like,
legit like
seriously, he's like an MMA guy I don't know, like I would just say something back, and then eventually he was just like, "Wow, you're like you're just not giving me what I need to like make these conflicts." And so
yeah. So I think he just wants it to go. I don't know, go viral or what. Yeah.
But it's like I get it too because I remember when I was first starting and like online at Instagram, I remember I would like be more sort of try to be not confrontational, like I guess controversial, and like, say things. Because like
it's cheap and easy.
It's cheap and easy, and it's like what you kind of get told is what you're supposed to use.
That's
like
what you're fed.
Yeah.
Well, you're fed that even on the algorithm because what do they put in front of people? It's like the most outlandish. So it becomes this thing where it feeds on itself. Where then if you go and you post something like that, all of a sudden you get more engagement. So then like the system's basically telling you, yeah, give us more of this. So you see people, they go in this route where they go in and they're like, it's cool and they have some stuff. Then all of a sudden it goes down this route and then it's like, okay, we're going away from the thing. And now we're just talking about random political shit like everybody else. You're like, God damn it.
Yeah, somebody's getting called Nazi.
Yeah. And then now it's Nazi. Now it's like, let me tell you about what I think about trans people. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, show me your wrestling again. Like, so you started kind of being a little bit more controversial.
Yeah. And then I would just end up, it was like the same pattern where I would like go say something, try to be like sassy or like, I don't know, just like not something super cool. And then like I get stressed about it later. Like,
oh, sure.
Yeah. My wife would have to hear about it. Like, Austin, like, maybe you shouldn't be quote unquote trolling if you're getting so stressed out about it later.
Yeah.
I remember like the one time that sticks in my mind is it was a Donaher. I like commented on a picture and I was just being like a dick. I sound like I just like corrected his grammar or something, and I'm still blocked. So
you got blocked? Oh, that's funny.
Blocked. But when I have people do that to me now, I like can't really get upset or mad because like I was doing the exact same thing. So I try to look at it was like you can't like get mad because like you were literally just doing that, and it was like 2 years ago. So, but I've just learn and get older. And not what I want to do to. But I thought it was at first that what I needed to do, right? Because that's what you're told. But like what you click on.
Yeah, but there's so many other ways to make a connection with people, to be compelling. And also that it's what we said, it's cheap and easy come, easy go. So like if that's how you develop, like if you develop your connection based with someone where their only reason for liking you is because whether you're in like some echo chamber and you said what they wanted you to say, or you're saying something controversial, the minute you say something slightly that they don't like, they're going to lose you because they're like, I don't like this guy that much. Fuck him. Yeah. But if they develop a connection where they're like, I really like this guy and he seems whatever, if you say something that I don't like, that's okay. He's cool. I don't agree with him here, but he's all right. His judo is really good. Whatever. You're going to have a better connection with people opposed to if your connection's based on like a really shaky foundation of oh, it's another guy on the internet talking trash just like
Yeah.
everybody else.
And I have friends like that who are like, that is generally who they are. And they're just like so hilarious.
And if that's who they are,
Yeah.
it's okay because that's who they are.
It's just, I'm just not.
I'm not that way
I
either.
tried to be that way, and
Yeah.
I just it was forcing it, and
Mhm.
I just not. I wasn't happy. Like it's just bad for everybody. Like, and so I just don't do it anymore.
Yeah, well, because if it's not who you are,
Right.
right, then you're putting on this persona, and then if you're not ready for that kind of, especially when you put controversial stuff out there, you'll get controversial stuff back,
Right.
and because what you come in is what's going to come back out, and then when it comes back to you, it can be stressful if
Yeah.
you're not built for it,
Right.
if you're not that kind of person. Have you ever had? Because I imagine you sometimes like watching some of your videos, you'll kind of have this like kind of almost like really playful style on your feet. Do you ever have people saying, "Oh, this wouldn't work. I'll just take you down," or whatever?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Like especially at first. I mean the classic right off the bat was like judo sucks, or like messages like judo's gay or whatever. Like, why are you sending me this? Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
People are just so
Like what are they?
insecure
What are they
about
supposed
stuff.
to say? Like wow, I never thought of it like that. Like that's a good.
Yeah.
Like, what a cool
Whoa.
perspective.
You know what?
You hear that about jiu-jitsu all the time.
Yeah, you know what? Since you said this to me, I just realized it's so gay. I'm going to stop doing this
Yeah.
now.
What am I doing here?
Yeah. What have I wasted my life? I'm so gay.
So
But now I get a lot of like I don't know, like you can't stand like that because you're just gonna get like blast doubled, and it's never, or it's very rarely like the good like wrestlers.
It's never good wrestler.
Yeah,
It's like some rando. Yeah.
They're like probably like who looks like he doesn't even train, you know,
Yeah.
like who might
maybe
he did it like
Yeah.
but
my student he was a NAIA wrestler. He won 3 national championships at heavyweight in the NAIA, and he's good. Like he had offers to go to D1, but he had a full ride in NAIA. So he's like, I get a free education. If I go to D1, he's like, I don't have a full ride. I got a full ride here. And he wrestled guys that were in D1. He could beat some of those guys and
takes them down.
And it was so interesting is he and I talked about this. Like sometimes he'll post something and they'll be, oh, you're just NAIA. You're just an NAIA wrestler from some guy that never wrestled college. Yeah. Because like he has buddies like a guy named Mason Paris who's like a really good wrestler, a stud, right? Really friggin' good. And one of the best US wrestlers, right? And he was like, that dude, he always gives me props.
Yeah.
Like I go train with him. Like he's like, he'll have me come out and like be a good partner with him to get some rounds in when he's getting ready for something. So it's like, well, that guy's opinion means something. This random asshole on the internet, his opinion means nothing. Because again, the guy who actually is really good, who's at that level, who's really freaking good, he always gives me props. Or he'll get like some D1 wrestler who's like or some college wrestler, whatever, coach will be like, that was a good technique on one of his videos. But then the random internet jiu-jitsu guys like, this is stupid.
I know, right? Or like I remember one time on a YouTube I like showed like this Osoto Gari. It's like the Sensei Seth guy. Yeah. So I just showed this Osoto that I copied from the Olympic gold medalist. That's like best judoka of our generation. This guy Shohei Ono. I watched him and then of course it's like people online like that. What a disgrace to do Osoto like that. Like that's called Osoto Otoshi.
Yeah.
Like he said this. What a travesty. Like it's never the people who actually are like true fans.
Right.
Like if you cared at all about watching judo, you would have seen the best judoka in the last like 10 years do it once or twice, and he does it all the time. It's always the people who are just like anonymous, like a Reddit sort of like throwaway account, like saying something.
Yeah, well, and that's a lot of the judo people that are like the judo lurkers. They get off on the names.
Dude, they love
the friggin' name. It's like I'll do like because in wrestling we'll call it something else. I'll be like arm drag to an inside trip. That's what we call the arm drag with basically what you guys call kochi. And they'll be like, this is Coach Guy. Yeah. I'm like arm drag inside trip. No, it's called Coachy. I'm like, bitch, we call it inside trip because that's what we learned it as.
The hilarious thing is like the guys that like get like really serious and good, like you still like no one says these like niche names. Like half of them are either like Osoto or like Seiyo Uchimata. Like that's like 40% of them. You know what I mean? It's not like Osoto. No one says Osoto Otoshi. And it reminds me of like the guy at the party who would like you say who, and he's like, actually it's whom.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Who wants to be around that guy?
Yeah, and it's like again, it's that guy that the guys that are really training hard. They have a certain level of like relaxedness with it because the techniques aren't these mystical things. They're very much a utility, right? Like it's like something you use. It's like if you had a guy who had like a really pair of like nice work boots, but like he doesn't actually work in them. He just wears them because they're nice looking, versus the guy that works in his boots. Like the guy that works in his boots are all dirty and crummy, and he wears them for utility, versus the guy who has the boots and he wears them and he wants to keep them all nice and polished or whatever. The person that like uses these techniques, whatever, they have a reverence for them, but they're utility. Whereas the person who doesn't, just kind of trains a little bit on the side, they have this, like you said, this is how we do it. It's like just be quiet, just relax.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't have the I think it's just
jiu-jitsu guys do it too.
Really?
You'll get the jiu-jitsu nerds who like they'll geek out about every like little position, like, and they'll all the names, like, did you know this isn't the name it was or whatever? I'm like, bro, like jiu-jitsu has so many different names for the same technique. Just
10th planet. It's got,
and sometimes we have techniques we don't even have names for.
Yeah,
we're just like, that thing you do after you do the arm bar. Yeah, like it's like, I mean, it is what it is. There's just so much. So you name the big stuff, and then you understand there's going to be all these little transitions in the middle. And sometimes you name them, sometimes you don't.
Is there anything about jiu-jitsu that kind of is weird or kind of very odd or very different from judo, or something that kind of throws you off?
The belts, like what a big deal the belts are. It's not like that in judo. In judo, you get your black belt so quickly that it doesn't really matter. So everybody's just a black belt.
But black belt's considered just like sort of you're competent.
Yeah,
right?
Like you do judo for like seriously for like I don't know 3 years. Like you're gonna get, like, anyone's gonna get a black belt, and so. I like and don't like about that in jiu-jitsu, because I like how you know what you're getting in jiu-jitsu. Like I've never gone with somebody who's like a brown or black belt, but it didn't feel like it,
Yeah.
But in judo, I guess in jiu-jitsu, I like that, but I just tend to not be somebody who likes like when hierarchy extends into like social settings. So when you have like a black belt who like thinks they're a black belt, so they don't talk to the white belt.
Oh, that's weird.
You know what I mean?
It's or like you can't ask to roll or something.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that.
That was jarring. Like I remember one of my first practices, like some guy, and another thing in judo is you never go with people like much bigger than you. So like 2 weight classes above, you never go with them because it's just too dangerous. Where jiu-jitsu is like safer, right? So I remember the first or second time I was on the mat. So I'm like, big guy was, I think, like a purple belt. He's like, hey, you want to go? And I was like, oh, no, thanks. I'm only going with people like around like 165. And then he was like really offended, like, because I was like a white belt and he was a purple, but you know what I mean? And that was jarring. But that was more of like a one-off experience. It didn't really happen a ton.
But yeah, again, it's like coming from that experience where if you're just constantly doing takedowns, it would be dangerous to do it with someone like a lot, right, on a regular basis with someone much heavier than you. I mean, because as you said, for instance, in wrestling, and I imagine they don't do these in judo, there's no such thing as an absolute division, where you just throw everybody that, like, whatever weight you are, you get to compete against each other.
Or if it's only the guys that are like 90 kilos and above. It would never be like I was like 66. I would never, like, my coach would never let me go do that, even if it was an option. I don't even think it was.
Yeah, because it's like, there's absolute divisions in jiu-jitsu, and sometimes you'll get like the little guy that wins. I've seen a lightweight win the tournament and beat like a super heavy.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, but it happens most of the time. The winners are usually the guys that are somewhere between 100 and like 185 to about 215. That's usually the winners in most cases, because they're strong enough to get the job done, but they're
Muhammad Ali, like around that, like
they're agile still, they can move.
But they're in good shape, and they're agile, and so they can play. But you don't have those absolute divisions in most sports. And if, like you said, if they do, it's for the big guys. It's not for the little dudes. Because it would be dangerous to be like getting launched with takedowns and throws over and over again.
Judo, there's just so much pressure on the knees, and like even more because you have these like handles everywhere. So like you're pushing on a door that or pulling a door that you're not just grabbing like trying to get a hold of like a brick. You have like a very like effective handle, so you can just generate a ton of power and direct it. So if I have some like 300-pound guy do that to my knee, like it's going to be high risk for me. In jiu-jitsu, it just doesn't. It feels much safer. Kind of goes back to our original thing we were talking about with it's just
how so you're a medical doctor now. I mean, you've been doing that. That's kind of your main gig. And how often are you training, or how have you worked in your training schedule? Like, what does that look like now?
I do like training, like live goes. I probably do like once every few weeks. And I'm like very, very diligent about this. Like I call it my mind dojo, this sort of like visualization stuff. but it's not just like sitting here, or it is sometimes, but mostly it's me moving, faking, like imagining. I've gotten like proficient at using it.
Yeah.
And then every few weeks I'll go because, I think I just could be somebody that improves more quickly.
So you don't so you train like once every few weeks.
Once every couple
So
weeks.
I'm always in bad shape.
Wow. So do you do any like activities like exercise or anything else other than jiu-jitsu, or you just like every few weeks you just like say, shit, I'm gonna dust off the rash guard and go in there and do it?
Yeah, I do like I do get my heart rate up moving and stuff, and I try to I'm good about like incorporating like things into my like daily routine that benefit me in some way in jiu-jitsu. So like for example, whenever I do my laundry, like of like rash guards or gis, I do it in the sink with my hands. And I've noticed, and I even got like a grip strength tester. And before I implemented it, like a few years ago, I tested my grip strength. And then after a few months of doing this, of only changing that, my grip was like way stronger. And so I
Interesting, huh?
So I go to the sink and I have a rash guard, and it's also like gets cleaner, I think. But I like really focus on like trying to squeeze as hard as I can and wringing it out.
That's like that's some Karate Kid Mr. Miyagi stuff,
dude,
right?
this is
Where the
really-
dude's like, so wax on, wax off. He's like, why am I doing this, Mr. Miyagi? And then some guys try to punch him. He's like, wax on.
Give me your grip.
Yeah.
It's part of my little so I pair that with like the visualization. So I go to the bathroom, I fill up the sink, soap, water, or whatever, and then I'm imagining it like while I'm like twisting, and I feel like certain things can kind of help me visualize it if I'm imagining like twisting a lapel. So I'll just like twist it, but I know it's improving my grip strength, so my hands are always really strong.
It's gnarly, man. I think it's
like
so
that.
interesting.
Like I'm giving my wife a massage, and then I'm just imagining.
it's
She's like,
funny
get
you
off
say
me!
that.
Ah!
My buddy Alex gives his wife or gives his fiance massages for like that. That's what he tells me, at least, that it's for his grip strength.
Yeah, I bet.
I copied something from him. He like turns off lights with his feet for his like hip flexibility.
Okay.
I mean, I'm always like I walk through halls, and I like if I'm not around a bunch of like people I don't know, and even sometimes when I am, I like try to go one way than the other way. And just like to fake, so like always.
He's at the ER, he's like
Tripping patients.
He's at the ER working, and this person's like got some diagnosis from him, and he's like, you're gonna be just fine. And then he walks out, and then they come out just to like get some air out of the room, and all of a sudden they see him like dashing back and forth down the hallway.
God, yeah.
You're like, I got the crazy doctor.
Oh my god. That's so interesting. So every couple of weeks, you train every couple of weeks. Are you doing like
That's actually pretty impressive.
It is
to be able to just train every couple of weeks and like
still be high level.
Yeah, it's like that's pretty impressive because most people are training at least with some more regularity.
Yeah. I mean, I train like twice to 3 times a week, and like 3 times a week is a sweet spot for me. But like, if I don't train for a week, I'm like, oh, I feel dumb. Like my body feels like it's just like, well, because the other thing is I'm not like going home and I'm just like, I've got like, family stuff to do. Like I'm like, got to take care of the kids or do this or whatever. So I don't really, but I do feel like your ability to actually have judo or jiu-jitsu or judo-jitsu, call it that, right? Have that on your mind like consistently, I think kind of keeps you connected in some ways.
I mean, it feels like I'm training even though I'm not like in the room, like actually like grabbing and like squeezing. But really it's like with my stand up, like, and that's like my main priority at trying to get better at. And so like all the little, like I always feel sharp in my movement of like getting myself from A to B, which is, I mean, so much of it, right? Like getting yourself from here to where you need to be to execute the takedown. And then like eventually you like get good enough at this where you get your predictions become very accurate. Like this is where the guy's going to be. I know he's going to be here. Like I know if I go this way, he's going to be here, and then I'll be over here. I don't know. It's easier than you'd think.
So do you train only every few weeks because of any other reason? Like, is it your schedule? Is it to avoid injury, or is it just because of something else? Like what like, because most of us, we all get kind of like addicted to it. So we like want to train regularly. What's the reason for you training so infrequently?
I don't know. I think so usually what happens is I go, and on the days that I roll, I film, and so I have a lot of like footage, and then I go back and edit them all. And so it's just like part of my like workflow.
Gotcha.
I also get very tired. Like I'm also, I feel like I'm spent for the rest of the day when I roll.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there are times where I like try to get like, I don't know, a practice in a week, but that's like, I don't think I've practiced in like a month right now.
Wow.
So you're just doing live rounds essentially.
Yeah. And then, but again, like I am doing, like, it's easy to sort of like say that like, it's not training, or it does feel like training.
It doesn't feel like training for people like in the traditional sense, right?
Yes.
So, but I think also too, you have a deep, I think what works for people, like sometimes it's like when you think about business, for instance, what works for a guy who's got like $1 billion company, whatever, that's not going to be the same strategies that's going to work for a guy who just started his business. Right.
Yeah.
So I think for like, say like with you have a good, deep understanding and knowledge of both how you work, your grappling style, how your body interacts with the mats and everything else. So I think that you can integrate styles where you can be a little bit more infrequent because of the fact that you have such a deep knowledge there that like you can tune into these things where I think that's something that more people can do as they get more proficient.
It takes a long time to get
Yeah,
there. And
but I think you can do it because of that. Yeah.
And I couldn't just start right now and go and practice. It's because like at first I felt like maybe it helped me 5%. And like then after a year, maybe it was like 15%. And then it's like to me, when I imagine it, it may seem different than whatever anybody else who has never done this is imagining. Because to me, I know exactly like how I need to move, and I know how it's supposed to feel, and I know when I'm feeling sharp, and I know when I'm kind of exploring like new ways to do it.
Yeah.
But it just feels like, oh, obviously, like this is, I don't know, like knowing a subject that somebody else ever hasn't studied, right? Like, like knowing how to write if somebody hasn't taken English or something, you know?
Right. Like,
I've spent like years doing it.
I think the example I could say is like if you can play an instrument very well, or like you understand the guitar and you could hear a song or some type of song that sounds similar, you could just probably pick it up and start to play it.
See, that sounds crazy to me. Like I could
like,
never
but that's
imagine that.
probably
But
the thing. That's probably
the
like,
thing.
well, I
this
had a
is like
buddy that like when I was taking guitar lessons, and he was saying that like he goes, he could hear a song,
right,
and he literally would know what it felt like to play the song just by hearing it. He could be like,
that's what I think it is. Like, you have that version of that.
I would have no idea. Like that just seems like crazy to me. Like how could that be?
But
it's probably
but when you think about what we do, like you think about like, because like for instance with judo, how fast the movements are and how intricate the details are, right? You're a lot of times you're moving your body into these small subtle adjustments, right? Like fractions of maybe like an inch over to the side, and you can feel if you're off or if you're on, and you're doing this in this explosive, very quick movement. And it sounds good. Like for us, it doesn't. It's you get used to it, right? Like okay, whatever. Even with jiu-jitsu, like sometimes I have to remind myself of like the things that I do and how far I am from being like a beginner or how far I am being from an average person, because you're like, this isn't normal being able to do these things. And so it's, I don't think it's any crazier. It's crazier to us because we don't understand the music, right? Because I can't do that either.
Right.
But it makes no sense but it's the same thing where like, you could watch a judo move. You could probably watch it like once or twice and go, all right, let me practice this. Whereas like someone else is like, wow,
certain ones on my right side for most of them, except my Seo, which I do left, but like I can't do it on my left. Like I can go through the motions and it may look similar, but it wouldn't be productive.
Yeah, it wouldn't feel the same.
It wouldn't be doing much. Yeah.
So let's talk about this real quick. So as you've gotten a little older, obviously, you're doing a lot of different things with work, being a medical doctor. What do you think? What are some ideas or maybe some recommendations on longevity? Like maybe, obviously Jiu-Jitsu, we've kind of discussed, probably a little more conducive to like being able to train. I think you can train in some capacity for a longer period of time. You can start on the ground, it's less impact, those type of things. So just in general, like what do you think as far as longevity
for like life or for grappling?
Just grappling.
Well, grappling and life. Because most of us want to be active as we get older, right? So most of us want to be able to do the things that we love doing for as long as we can do them.
I think they're hand in hand, yeah.
But obviously the strategies that you will implement when you're in your 20s and you're like biting at the bit to compete versus as you age, they begin to change a bit.
So, I mean, certain things like, and often they're the same thing, like health span. I don't know if you guys have heard that term versus like lifespan. Yeah. So
I read Peter Attia's book recently.
Exactly. So he's the guy that
I didn't necessarily agree with what he said about statins so much, but a lot of his stuff was really good.
That's so cool. You know, have you heard of this guy, Peter Attia?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Normally I'm I bring him up. I'm like, no, I've never heard of Peter Attia.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Like I think lifespan is like how long you live, but health span is like how
quality.
Quality. Yeah.
And the books, if you guys haven't read the book's super interesting. It has some really like interesting advice and different what's that?
He does have a podcast too.
Yeah. And then like I don't know about like I'm sure he does on the podcast too. The book will give you like if you want to like get a particular blood work done, like here's the test you can go order and things like that. So
yeah. So I mean, like I'll like say a few things, but like he's much better at this than I am. And he's like everything that like or even if he's not correct, like maybe like something is wrong, but like with all the evidence that we have right now, it's the best sort of guess that we have.
It's again, it's why people, if you hear a real person who understands science, when they talk about science or scientific studies, they say the science suggests, right? They don't say this is what it is, right? Like when you heard like, during like 2020, where trust the science, like that's bullshit, right? It's like the science suggests this. We could find something brand new tomorrow. Science isn't a dogma. Science is a way of thinking, and it, you can break down things. So you hear like a person that talks about science in that way. Here's what it suggests. This could be right. This could be wrong. But as what we understand right now, this is the best information we have to go off of. So there you go.
Yep.
I mean, I'll start with like just health span, because I think a lot of it correlates with grappling.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain things that like cross eukaryotic models universally increase health span and lifespan. One of them is obviously like caloric intake. So, I mean, sugar is probably the prime example of there's a very dose dependent relationship with health, right? So too much sugar, you get diabetic, right? You don't have as much sugar, that's fine. And the less you have, the longer you live. The going through these periods of like caloric
deficit.
Yeah, caloric deficits are like intermittent fasting. So I've been doing that since like 2014, and I mean, all the literature suggests that is very just helpful and prolongs life, prolongs health span. And for grappling, what we kind of touched on that, it's like get to kill two birds with one stone, get used to cutting weight and so I think that is often helpful, assuming that you're able to train well, prioritizing techniques that have a low risk of injury for you and your training partner. So I don't do certain techniques because they're dangerous for me and for my training partner. So I select ones which are safe.
What are some of those techniques that maybe
in
judo or
the classic two are Tani Atoshi, where it's kind of like a falling trip on the leg. When done correctly, it's not very dangerous, but it's easy to do wrong and really mess up.
Someone plants their foot the wrong way, and
Tai Toshi too. It's safe if you really know what you're doing.
Tai Toshi's where you're out like this with a foot here, right? And you're like this. So yeah, I mean, I would imagine your leg could get buckled if that person.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I'm so certain gyms like Shintara's gym, they don't do a lot of Tani Atoshi or Tai Toshi unless you're like really high level. And I get on the guys at my gym and like the people who run the classes, like they also are fans of this sort of philosophy where we don't do techniques that put each other in danger. I also am not a big fan of taking falls when you're drilling on like mats over and over. I just don't think that's good. It just puts unnecessary mileage on the body. So I try to select my techniques that I can get better at without having to actually go through the throw. So the Osoto I do, it's one of my favorite throws because I don't need to smash the guy into the mat to get better at it. I can just go in and ask, like, does this feel like it's supposed to? And then
you can get to that point and then you can back off.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's important because, like you look at like different things like I've met some older judokas and, the classic thing for them is their back from taking the falls, just getting slammed over and over again. Their back takes a pounding.
And this is unnecessary. It's so easy to just, if you don't have a crash pad, well, and you're not going to have a crash pad for years, don't pick these throws. You need to bury a guy into a mat. Like there's other options.
Yeah.
And everybody likes it. No one's going to want to train with you if you're that guy that's going to bury them. You know, like I don't want to take falls for some guy who's slamming me. But Alex, my main training partner, like, hey, Alex, can I get some fit? It's never even almost an issue because it's going to be comfortable for both parties.
Yeah. Well, and I think we talked about this before too. When you take one of your partners down, making sure that you know, in boxing, for instance, we talk about pull the punch, right? You don't follow through on the punch as hard as you could. Like whenever you're sparring, like there are some hard sparring sessions for sure, but in a lot of cases, you know, when you're just trying to get your work in, it's like you want to know that I just hit you and I could have driven that through more, but I don't want you to have like, I don't want to basically have every session turns into like CTE fest, right? And with like a lot of like takedowns and stuff, good guys can take people down and they pull the pressure off as they're happening. So if a good judoka takes you down, they can pull, basically you'll get this pull like as you're hitting the ground, so you don't land as hard.
Yeah.
You know, when they're hitting. And then with a wrestler, like a good wrestler who gets into jiu-jitsu, knows how to like do it, they can pick you up and dump you, of course. But like Brandon, like rolling with him again, 245 pounds, he's an athletic monster. He can take me down and it's smooth.
Yeah.
Like I don't fall down. I'm not scared. Like I would rather wrestle with him than I would like an inexperienced person who doesn't know how to do that. Even though I have no chance of taking Brandon down like half the time. Like I think I probably sat him on his butt once, you know, and then he got up, he was like, oh snaps. And then he like went into wrestling mode and killed me. But so I don't have a chance to take him down, but I know I'm going to be safe.
Right.
You know? And so again, it's
and part of that is you too, though, knowing that if you know he has you here, you're
accepting,
gonna not give like an extra 110% to try to prevent it. It's both people
accepting it, right? Being like, okay, you got me. I'm going to go with this now, and just
like, I get what's going on here. You're being easy. I'm gonna be
Well, that's like something I've thought about with like jiu-jitsu. Like a lot of injuries like will come from when people are at their end ranges, and you know about this, where they're beginning to really tense up, where they're fully resisting, or maybe they're trying to go for a sweep and they lock the leg out and it's not working, so they really try to muscle it, and all of a sudden something snaps. Opposed to if you're giving it that much muscle, either just accept it or I'm done.
Well, it's same thing with submissions, you know, not ripping submissions or knowing when you're caught, kind of being controlled with any kind of leg locks or ankle locks, stuff like that. Some people don't know. Like you said, you're not terribly experienced, and I'm sure if you get caught in an ankle lock, like they're probably not going to crank on you. You know, they're going to respect that, and they're like, hey, I got you. Or you give them that kind of, if they hold you there for like 3 seconds, okay, you probably you know, they have the submission kind of thing. So
like caring about the people you train with,
100%.
I know that the guys that I train with never do that, and I wouldn't put myself in those positions if I suspected they would, because we all have so much to lose. That's such an important part of our life, right?
Well, you're a valuable training partner for them as well, right? Like, you're not training, so shit, they're not going to have somebody to get some judo rounds or some takedown rounds, and vice versa. You know, if you slam them through the mat, then they're going to get
and I don't want to be the guy who's like, so I never throw if I can. I think my track record, like with throwing and hurt, I kind of don't pull punches as much as I do with most guys, with 2 of my training partners, because they're very, very, very good. But with everybody else, if I can't baby them down and make it comfortable, like I don't even want it to hurt. Like, and if it is going to risk that, I just don't do it.
Yeah. Well, and then like as far as like, you know, continue talking about longevity, kind of. Like, do you do any kind of strength training still? Is there anything you like to do for like a warm up, even, or cool downs, or things you do outside of grappling?
So my the 2, I guess my knees are probably statistically what is most likely to be injured if I'm grappling, and so I try to look at, well, what is going to increase my likelihood of a knee injury, and one of them is having me think my foot is here when actually it's hitting the mat like a little bit to the side and I step on it wrong, or having somebody, you know how you always like people, there's a sort of philosophy like, oh, it's always people get hurt when it's one more round, like we're just doing one more, and people are tired and they're not feeling sharp. So I if I feel like that, I just don't. If I'm exhausted, I'm bored, and if I'm not having fun, if I'm not feeling
just cut
sluggish, I'm just like, I can go work on something that's safer. Like I can do, I don't know, drill something on the ground. I'm not going to do stand up with this guy who has the power to hurt me. You know? And I don't do like weightlifting, but my my like knees and quads are, I think, good at what they need to do, of like being able to change directions quickly and pivot and do things where I don't know if I would have torn my ACL if I hadn't been doing it. It's hard to say, but I think they help.
Yeah. Well, I think you have like, I think part of it, your body's used to kind of changing directions. You have that kind of like those little, like almost like you have these receptors in your joints.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have like kind of the response. You have the ability
yeah.
to probably your balance is probably very good too. So you can hop on one leg or change directions because a lot of that, you're hopping or you're, obviously off balancing. So I think your ability to do that is probably very good. And I think that over time saves your knees, but also there's like, I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of like, there's certain joint preparation exercises that you can utilize. And then also just strengthening. I think like reinforcing your joints through strength training and also working on end range strengthening, like isometrics, I think is really valuable. And it's just the same as like the principles of end range isometrics is like, you can actually start to strengthen the ligaments and tendons and structures there, but you have to work at those end ranges and at least at like 70, 75, kind of like you need to lift at 75, 80% of your 1 rep max to get strength gains. Muscular changes, you have to do the same thing at the ligaments and things like that. So you can actually do that and strength train that capacity. So I do a lot of these like joint circles or joint cars, which is like basically joint preparation. I do that all the time, especially for the knees, because the knees have to, they flex and extend, but they also rotate. You have that tibial rotation on the knee, on the shin on the knee. So that's really important. That's how a lot of these injuries occur.
Yeah,
and especially even straight ankle. Chew's like looking at me like,
no. I'm letting this.
I get it. I get into
good.
it.
And
it's the physical therapy
break. I don't
going.
I mean, like you asked, like what things I do. If I was doing everything that I probably should be doing, it would be more stuff like
more stuff.
Said,
but pick and choose. Yeah, you got to pick and choose. Like I think yoga for me would be really beneficial. I get bored doing yoga. I just can't do it. So I got to do some kind of different movement, I've tried different things, but like strength training, I always enjoy, some mobility work, even like movements. I enjoy doing that stuff, and the end range, like the joint preparation stuff I enjoy as well. But everybody's needs are not the same. You know what I mean? Your body's different than Chewy's, and we all may need one of us might need more stability. One might need more mobility. You never know. So yeah. What you got?
I was
just giving me a steely blue eye stare. So if people we're excited, you're gonna do a seminar tomorrow with us. So Austin, if people want to see what you're up to, kind of train with you, or even kind of like see some of your techniques on Instagram, where can they do that?
Oh yeah, just the dumbest name on Instagram, Bad Boy Medicine.
I love it.
It maybe isn't the best name, but it's definitely not the dumbest name on Instagram. I could be on there for about 5 seconds and find something way worse than that.
Yeah. No, it's got, I was thinking about your name, like Bad Boy Medicine. I was like, is like medicine for bad boys. It's like, oh, you're a bad boy, you're about to get this medicine. Is that what it like,
Oh man.
Whenever I see bad boy, I always think of the shorts.
Yeah.
I always think of the
right.
I thought maybe it was like an ode to
So first time I think I watched one of your videos, you were wearing some like short shorts. I was like, or some spats or something. I was like, maybe he's got some bad boy shorts on there.
So like Biggie Smalls, he says bad boy in his lyrics once in a while. So and it could be anything.
There you go.
Yeah, cool, nothing and dumb at the same time.
Yeah.
You can start taking pictures of this moniker or like pictures that you can add up there of you being like trying to look really tough and intimidating.
Let's do it.
And then just like it can be completely like not who you are.
No, that's like my little profile picture right now. It's me like flexing my muscle and having my medical school roommate with a stethoscope listening to my bicep. It's like this is the dumbest. Like obviously, it's just
hear that.
60 beats a minute.
All right,
I've got a good heart rate.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate your time, brother.
Thank you guys so much.
All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully you got something from that. Again, be on the lookout for the YouTube content and some of the Instagram stuff coming up soon, as we'll have that up on the interwebs, and you guys can watch that and get some interesting ideas for no-gi judo related to jiu-jitsu and grappling. And again, it should be fun. And again, as I said before in this podcast, make sure you guys be aware of becoming like a dogmatic martial artist, because even in jiu-jitsu, that stuff exists. You see it now where people will be very closed off to certain styles of jiu-jitsu or certain styles of training or whatever it is. Be open-minded to stuff, because when I look back at some of the early stuff in jiu-jitsu, right, they would tell other martial arts to be very open-minded. And then I remember, they tell me, oh, guillotines don't work. That's a low percentage move. And then sure enough, someone comes with a variation. It's like, well, bullshit, that's a good move. So again, keep an open mind. I say be an anti-martial artist, You know, like don't like, because when you think martial artists, it used to be all about your style, this style, whatever. Haven't like, you know, it's like Bruce Lee said it, right? Like no style. Just be like water, my friend. Be water. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast episode, guys. And again, if you want to support the podcast, you can do so by checking out our sponsors, charlottesweb.com. Excellent CBD product, one of the best in the market. If you guys want to get some of their stuff, try out some of their gummies, their balms, and rubs for sore muscles, or the tinctures, you can do so. It can be a great product for recovery. A lot of people get some benefits for rest and sleep, things like that. The promo code is ChewJitsu30, ChewJitsu 30, and you can use the promo code at their website at charlottesweb.com. If you guys want to get some new jiu-jitsu gear, t-shirts, rash guards, shorts, anything jiu-jitsu related, you can do so by going to epicrollbjj.com. When you go there, that's my buddy Matt's website. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt that makes jiu-jitsu gear for us as jiu-jitsu practitioners. Again, great quality stuff, great customer service. I do a lot of business with him as far as making my own stuff and the stuff for my gym as well. So I'm a believer in what he does. And so again, if you guys want to check out some of his stuff, epicrollbjj.com is the website. Jiu-Jitsu20 is the promo code for 20% off the order. If you guys want to support the podcast directly, go to the website, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you go there, you can get details on the membership that we have for the Patreon. That'll give you access to an exclusive library of content. You'll get some free, or not a free, but a ad-free version of the podcast, along with some other bonuses. So you can go there and get some details for it. And again, you'll be supporting the podcast directly. And guys, if you want to get my daily email, which I mentioned earlier in the episode, you can go to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join, you'll get my daily email. Of course, you'll be subscribed to it, going through everything from the books I'm reading to training ideas to random troll comments on the internet when people are talking about my man boobs, and then slipping out of my gi. And you'll also get access to a couple of free ebooks that I give away upon joining as a free bonus to you. That will help you, one, design a game plan for your jiu-jitsu, and then one will also help you with some training strategies. So if you guys want to get access to all that, go to chewjitsu.net/join. And guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate you. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. We'll see you next time.